Ready?
I'm ready. You guys are.
Ready?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to call this meeting of the Prince William County Electoral Board to order. Thank you for being here. If you would all please rise for a moment of silence and remain standing for the pledge. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. First item of business is approval of the minutes for our last meeting, September 10th. Do we have a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the minutes as written and submitted.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Pass. Okay, next, reports from electoral board members. Mr. Secretary, do you have anything?
Nothing to report today.
Okay. Madam Vice Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have 2 points. One, a word of praise, and second, a word of caution. So the praise goes to the Office of Elections staff, and our election officers, our temporary hires, all the folks that have so far been running the elections in a way that has been professional, excellent, and so I again want to express my gratitude and appreciation for the professionalism with which all bring to this very important job. The word of caution has to do with the heightened tensions that we read about in the newspapers and we witness firsthand throughout our community about, again, differences of opinions, which I think our society welcomes those differences, but in a way that should be respectful and not resort to violence. So I am worried about the people that are in the midst of other people that approach them in a threatening way and threaten violence to settle their differences. This is just something that I'm 70 years old. I've been around a long time. I've never seen it come to this. I know elections and people have their favorite candidates and issues, but honestly, we have to restrain and refrain from such vitriolic, threatening violence when we have disagreements. And so I appreciate the effort that the training of our election officers to de-escalate, people that come with tempers and with ill will and wishing to cause harm and chaos and confusion. And so I think it's incumbent upon all of us to manage that potential for escalation of violence. So word of caution, a word of praise. It's a difficult job that all of us are called to do, but we have a duty to do it in the most respectful, law-abiding way that we can.
Okay. Thank you. I have nothing this morning. So we will proceed to the General Registrar's report.
Okay. Talking about preparation for the general election that is now just under 4 weeks away from its conclusion. I know voting has already been active for a couple weeks here. In terms of our overall task progress this elections, this is as of last Friday. I generated the report. We had 182 tasks complete and 171 tasks to go. So there are always a lot more tasks in the last 3 to 4 weeks than there are a couple months out. But I thought this report was one of the better ones that I've seen since we started doing this. We only had 3 tasks that were behind schedule. They were all fairly small tasks that that there were reasons for them being behind. So nothing that really concerned me, and we had about a dozen tasks that were ahead of schedule. So I think that everything is going along really well. The board was provided with a complete list of the task statuses before the meeting, and I can just stop here if you all had anything you had seen in that report that concerned you or any questions about anything. Happy to answer those if you all had anything.
I don't know whether it's with this part, and we had discussed you were going to schedule 1 or 2 trainings for authorized observers.
Yes.
Where are we on that?
So I'm going to send out that notice either today or tomorrow, Keith. We're going to do it next Thursday in the evening to hopefully fit people's schedules better. It's going to be an online training, so hopefully in the evening where it doesn't conflict with potential work problems. I think it's 7 p.m. So that's going to go out to the board and the party chairs, like I said, in the next 24 hours. It'll be next Thursday at 7 p.m. I'm trying to figure out what I guess the date on that would be the 16th. And then I think we'll see what the attendance is like, and if you all and or the chairs think it would be useful, we can do another one just before Election Day. I think this one is kind of just before all the early voting satellite sites roll out, where we might have some additional observers and some newer observers during that period. And I know on Election Day that's often the case as well. So I think we'll see kind of how that one goes, and if any of you all or all of you all can have the time to be, I think it's just going to be an hour. If you all have the time to attend that and can, one, provide feedback on anything you feel like we need to cover or cover better, and then 2, if you think it's worth doing again. I don't think if we do it once, it won't be hard to do it again, because the prepping the material and everything is most of the work. So so anyway, I'm going to be leading that, running that training. Partly because I think a lot of that training will probably be questions that people have about different nuance of the law. And I know that Marcus, as an example, sent an email a couple days ago about what is the rule for curbside voting and observation of that. And I think part of the challenge of this is that the laws for authorized observers is generally kind of broad. There are some specific things that they are allowed to see both at opening and closing, and then there are some general rules about what they can observe while the polling place is in operation. And curbside is usually outside the 40-foot line, which is really where our control and authority ends for the most part. If there are people being, if you're standing at the 45-foot line with a assault rifle, or you bring a loudspeaker right outside that line, then there actually are provisions for that. But some of these things, it's nuance, and that's why the code gives the chief discretion on some of these things, and they really can be subjective. So how close can an observer be? That can be different when you're in a parking lot like we have outside where it's really open, versus something where maybe a wall's really close there and it's enclosed, and what makes the voter feel uncomfortable with an observer, which again can be subjective to the individual voter. So a lot of these things are challenging. I do think that the law generally favors the rights of the voters and the authority of the election officers, and that the code is pretty broad about that observers cannot, the code is hinder or delay voters or election officers. that can be pretty specific, and it can also be pretty, I'm trying to turn around and you're in my way, so how one interprets that in an individual situation with different polling places, with different people, with different personalities, I think that is the real challenge with a lot of these things. And so we try to encourage our officers to build good relationships with the observers, and I have seen our officers fail at that at times in how they've treated observers, and I've seen the observers fail at times in terms of how they treat the officers. So I imagine a lot of this will be Q&A, and unfortunately I can't give always objective standards and bright line rules for how these behaviors play out, which is why I think having a good relationship, we've always talked to the officers in all the jurisdictions I've been in about, hey, communicate with these individuals early in the day, build the expectations for one another, relay your concerns, try to work through those problems at an individual level. And usually it works, and sometimes it doesn't, and that's when myself or you all have to go and provide a second opinion. And of course, the officers have the right to remove an officer remove a voter that observer, they can't remove a voter. They have the right to remove an observer who is causing a problem in the precinct if a majority of the officers. And honestly, I've seen that's pretty rare. But there are occasions where it's appropriate. So, difficult thing, but I think that's why having a session about it to sort of relay that to those observers is important, and that they understand that they do have rights and in this situation, but also that the voters and the officers have rights and responsibilities that they have to be able to fulfill. So it is a balance, it is a tightrope sometimes, and hopefully the training will help not only us convey what some of those rules are, but perhaps some of the observers that are there might bring attention, some concerns and things like that, so it provides a forum for discussion of that. So to that end, I would appreciate any or all of you, being there. You guys can't discuss business, obviously, but I think it will inform things for future board meetings, and we'll see if a second training would be a good idea. So.
Well, I know we discussed this whole issue that I remember at VIBA, and there were a couple jurisdictions that they had big signs like a stop sign, and what they were telling people is for the curbside voter, if we put a stop sign on this car, that means voting is going on and you stay away from the car. And what we're trying to do is balance, the rights of, the authorized observers, although for curbside vote, it's probably more they're not really authorized reps. They're campaign workers outside the 40-foot line. And the rules are somewhat different for them than for an authorized rep. But, I remember several years at the DMV where we had lines of cars, in line to vote, and we would have campaigners basically swarming around going car to car, do you want a sample ballot, this kind of stuff. And obviously voters can wave them away, and some voters are more hypersensitive about that than others. But if there's some way to draw a line where when the voter is being checked in or when they're waiting in line, then it's okay for the authorized people to come up and ask them if they want a sample ballot. But once the election officers have brought out the ballots to the people sitting in their car, then the campaign people need to stay away. But unless you have some visible sign to tell them voting's going on, you shouldn't be here anymore. But I know there are some counties that said we just have these big stop signs, and we tell the people, if there's a sign on the windshield of this car, that means there's voting, so don't go up and bother them.
Yeah, I think we saw that at a conference, the little tent that they basically put on the car. I think we could look into that and see if that's something that we could, add to the process, just to put that up there, because I thought that was a really good solution to that problem, so that the campaigners and the observers know, hey, voting is now in progress, so give this person clearance. So it's a challenging thing. I think especially when you're in your car, even if you're just talking to the officer there, you know, you're trapped at that point. You're not free to move. So if you've got someone, you're talking to the officer and you kind of see someone floating in your periphery back here, it can kind of make you nervous, like, who is that? What are they doing? What's their role? Because I think a lot of the voters probably don't know what an authorized observer is, what their rights are, what that process is. They probably just assume that's another election officer or something like that. I mean, even some of the observers call us up after the election and say, I'm calling to get my paycheck, and we say, oh, that we don't pay you. That is the campaigns and the parties that do that. So, so yeah, it's a challenging thing, but we'll look into that for the stop sign, and we'll talk with the observers about that at the session next week. So.
Barring my schedule being taken out of my own hands, I will be there. I look forward to that, and that can happen, by the way. I do think that it'll be a valuable hour, time well spent, and totally acknowledge that it's a unique situation, curbside voting, which kind of is at the limits of our authority, being outside the 40-foot line. However, I think and it's subjective, as you said. However, I think it can be made a little bit more objective if we, through what we're going to do during that hour, as well as us, we can formulate some guidelines, and especially if we can get both party chairs to sign off on it. Because, as Keith said, they're really just campaigners outside of the 40-foot line, maybe not technically authorized. Anybody can be out there,
right,
beyond that point, doing, as long as they're not threatening anybody's safety, right, which is a different public safety concern. But I think it's usually authorized representatives who are doing that. I don't know of too many random, people of the public who just take it on themselves to go hang out and watch curbside voting. So I think if we can get the parties to buy off on it, and the party chairs, then I think we can go a long way toward making it more objective than it is right now. Granted, there are certain locations where those objective standards might have to be tweaked a little bit, but I think we can get 90% of the way there to removing the whatever consternation there is. And like, it's what happens at a car during curbside voting is essentially the same thing that's happening inside the precinct in terms of check-in, in terms of voting, and so it follows that the same rules would apply, both for the voter, the election officer, and the authorized representative. And the authorized representative, per the code, just has to be close enough to be able to see and hear what's happening. And I know that can get a little bit vague as well, but being able to verify that an ID is being requested and presented, that only the number of ballots that match the number of people in the car are being issued, those types of things. And how close is that? I don't know. Is it 10 feet? 10 feet from the car?
Yeah.
Is that reasonable?
Probably.
So yeah, so if we can just kind of get to a set of objective standards that we ask the parties to adhere to and to enforce with their authorized representatives, I think it'll help.
Yeah. Yeah, I would note that I think that usually, in terms of curbside, I don't think the authorized observers, I haven't seen them go out there that much over the years. And that's partly because they're not actually checking in the voter at the car. That officer is still bringing back that their identification, their information in to check them in the poll book in the precinct. So a lot of times the observers are just at the poll booth, because whether you're voting curbside or you're walking into the polling place, all of the check-ins are still happening, in the same place there. So I think that the campaigner issue, and this was the subject of some discussion at the state legislative level this year about if there should be a bubble basically around the like a mini prohibited area that magically follows that car around when it pulls into the curbside area. And I think that they couldn't. I think it was pretty supported by both parties, but I think they couldn't determine what that was. Should it just be when that voter's voting? Does it happen at that moment? Does the bubble then pop up? Does it happen? Is it 5 feet? Is it 10 feet? Is it 25 feet? Is it 40 feet? What's the distance there that's appropriate? So, I think it's an ongoing thing. And to Heidi's comments earlier about people not getting along and violence, and even just general grousing at each other at campaign spots. You know, I don't know what the law will be in the longer term. Virginia has a closer, the 40-foot boundary is one of the shortest in the country. I think there's 2 other states that have 25 feet. The average is somewhere around 130 feet. So the vast majority of states either have 100 feet and 150 feet, which basically says, hey, you can stand out there and hold your sign up and, when I used to vote in Maryland, the campaigners are out on the curb when people are pulling into the place, holding up their signs and kind of cheering on the candidates.
So
But
they
they're
didn't pass out sample
they're
ballots?
not really interacting with the voters, and I mean, it happens some. They're still, in some places, but I think that's where, there are some states that have, like, approach things too, that you can't get in the way. We had that in, one thing in the early voting sites where you had a really big area outside, we had trouble with the campaigners that were literally walking backwards in front of the voters as they're trying to go up, and, I think for some people, they really appreciate the resources being there, and so curbside voters would be no different. For other voters, it's a hindrance and an annoyance, and they know who they're voting for, and they don't really want to get a sample ballot to indicate to other people how they might be voting. They don't really want to have someone sort of soliciting them as they're trying to go in and do this thing. So it's both a good resource for people and also an annoyance to a lot of people, and I think finding the balance for that is difficult, especially in our current environment with the 40-foot rule. So this is like, all of these things are kind of interconnected to the voter experience, what constitutes intimidation, when somebody's coming in. Or even just generally, there might be voters out there who are like, well, I'd love to go vote, but I'm so tired of walking through a sea of people to get there, it's just not worth it. Which, if you feel that way, mail voting is a great option for you, perhaps. Yes, exactly, that's true.
I know Elect has a thing they publish, the do's and don'ts,
Yeah,
which doesn't cover, curbside voting specifically. But I think maybe if we have something similar to that, that's maybe a little bit more detailed,
yeah,
that we can hand out to both parties.
yeah.
So, and our election officers have it, the authorized representatives have it, and now there's really not a debate about what somebody can or can't do, or what the authority of the election officer is. They both got the same piece of paper in their hand.
Yeah, yeah. I do think that, I will praise the chairs of both parties who have talked to, I know their campaigners at times about behavior. I know they put out a joint statement before the presidential election last year saying, let's not go around the county tearing each other's signs out of the ground and throwing them in garbage cans. That doesn't serve anybody. And as Heidi noted, we should be able to have different views on ideas and discuss them and go home and say, agree to disagree.
Right.
It's an ongoing challenge. But I think that do's and don'ts is something that we can look at, and that I think that stop sign is something we could put on for the curbside specifically. So,
Unless there's more discussion on that particular point, task 42.
this is like E- statement 42.
Yeah, it's completed task. Sending party chairs draft precinct staffing lists and
Yeah.
finalizing election officer assignment and
Yes.
email officers. So I know there was a small administrative correction to that
Yeah.
staffing assignment that we
Yeah.
had to, did we send that out to the party so they have the correct table?
You mean the overall, the numbers
Yeah.
that it was shifted down? I don't think we have. I don't think we sent an additional one.
I don't know how close attention people pay to such things, but it's good to
Okay.
have the correct information
We
on the
can,
street.
John, can you resend that to, we can resend that to the party chairs.
Yeah.
It was the one we were talking about with the shift in
Yeah,
the precinct number,
yeah.
basically? Okay.
There was nothing technically incorrect about the table.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was just when we had tried to move the cap to the top of the list, the lines got misaligned.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. We can resend that, and we have another one coming up in another week
so we can
as
just-
well. Yeah. So, I believe, John, correct me if I'm wrong, 6 weeks and 2 weeks are our 2 marks for, we do a preliminary one to give the board and the party chairs time to see where we're at the beginning. And then we do one again at 2 weeks. It used to be 1 week, but the board actually modified that. I think it was a little over a year ago to move it to 2 weeks. To one, give the board more time to review it before election day, but also the code gives party chairs the ability to nominate additional officers as long as it's, I think, 10 days before the election. So the code, once we get 3 days from the election, there's not a lot we can do at that point. But at least the chairs are getting it several days before that window then. So if there was, for example, to be a precinct that was really short or a couple precincts really short on officers, the chairs could get some people to apply. The board could have an emergency meeting. We haven't had to do that, but the timeline that we have now at least gives that option. And I think it gives the board just more time to kind of review and if you see, Marcus, like, hey, these two precincts are a problem, or Heidi or Keith has some, feedback or whatever, it gives us time to relay that to the staff, and then for the staff to react to that and fill in where we can, so.
And you had indicated in that initial list, and we had discussed that there were a handful of precincts there that, even though they have an even number of officers, they may still have a disparity between the parties. And the explanation for that is that in a lot of these precincts, we sometimes expect that one or more of those officers is going to fall out, and as we get closer to election day, that we actually do achieve that parity. And this is just kind of an insurance policy or hedging our bets. So as we get closer to election day and we see these more finalized plans develop, we should start to see those gaps start to close, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I know that Dina and Rick have been working on that in precincts that have odd numbers.
If it has an even number of
officers. Even number precincts, sorry, it's the even numbers. So it would be a precinct where they had like 8 officers, for example, and there'd be 4 of one party, 3 of another, and then 1 nonpartisan.
And I would also congratulate them on the fact that, even with implementing those types of insurance policies, our total numbers are still, code compliant.
They're very
got
good.
The chief and assistant chief parity met as well. So good job on that.
They do a lot of great work on that. When I was doing that job in DC, we didn't even have any partisan requirements, and it was a hard task just to get enough people at each location to do all the jobs. So doing that, and then also making sure that we're compliant in our leadership positions and the overall numbers and the precinct by precinct level, it's a lot of work. So
it is a 104-sided Rubik's Cube, and it's how many pieces of equipment do we employ? 700?
I don't.
Between poll books and machines?
Between 5 and 6.
Between 5 and 600, and we have close to 1,000 election officers across the 104 precincts if you count the cap. So, it is no small feat for all of this to get scheduled and executed, and it takes an immense amount of work to orchestrate that symphony, and the conductor and his staff really do a phenomenal job. And so I don't want any of this to come across as throwing stones or being picky. It's just all teamwork, and I appreciate what they do.
Yeah. Well, and we strive to be as tightly compliant with the code as we possibly can be. And that can be challenging at times, and I think that there are aspects of some of these code sections that would probably beg a relook, but those are for other people to decide and make decisions on at the end of the day. All right. So communications, we did have our voter guides go out. I would guess you all have received one.
I got mine.
Okay. I think most of the staff, we got ours on Friday, and then we know some people got them on Saturday, and then Monday, I believe. So I think we've done them in the past, and sometimes when you do a large mailing like that, they really arrive at different times, but they seem like they all fell in the same window. The printer that we worked at, Data Integrators, does a great job. They're very reasonable. I mean, I think we did it for about $54,000. So for postage and printing costs for 160,000 pieces of mail, the postage is the biggest part of that. So they did a great job with that. I want to compliment Thalia on her design, which we've gotten compliments on from different people. I think the calendar is that visual calendar is really helpful instead of a list of, all the things. It kind of separates that out. And this was last year for the presidential, we did a little more full one that had a little more detail and talked about even some things like election security and stuff like that. but this was a very cost-effective way to give people something they could just stick on their refrigerator and know when and where they need, especially with early voting. I think that's probably the thing that people have the most questions about, and we know that every day for the past couple weeks, there's, you know, a certain number of people that are going over the DMV thinking they can vote, even though we have put up signs there to tell people that it starts on October 19th. But hopefully this helps people with that. Or if they did want to vote by mail, then obviously the deadline, they still have some time before the deadline, but the sooner you can apply for that, the better, to give more time to receive the ballot, to return it, all that good stuff. So I think it gives the overview of the most important things, and hopefully that is helpful to voters. Let's see, early voting. So we did modify some safety in our main office parking lot. We have, again, closed the side entrance as you come in there. It just has been too dangerous. Some of the cars that come through, there's really big trucks parked there. They come through a little too fast sometimes, and people are walking back and forth there. The campaigners are over there as well, so we just went ahead. And so I thank John for kind of reacting to that on like the first or second day. He noticed some issues there and had a solution implemented by the end of that day, and I think it's just better for everyone's safety there, and it makes it a little bit more of a pedestrian-friendly zone right in front of the early voting site. We are expecting significant turnout over the final 2 weeks. That's when we find the vast majority of early voters go out, especially in the final few days. We are encouraging people, obviously, to use the evening hours on Wednesday, and we always mention to people, hey, if you go out on a Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday and vote, that's going to be, you know, a lot better than what you might see on a Saturday, especially that final Saturday. To incentivize that as well, during the final week of early voting, we have the, I wish I'd put a picture up in the slide, but the Halloween version of our I voted sticker with all the monster hands on it. So that we only had 5,000 of those made. So on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, while supplies last, voters can opt to get that, or they can get the regular I voted sticker if they prefer that. So it's just something to try to get people out before that last Friday and Saturday are always very busy. So I expect that on Sunday, October 19th, we will have a lot of voters out. Thankfully, the Commanders game is at 4:30 that day, so you can go out and vote and then see the football game. I think Thalia and I were talking about a tweet to make your October 19th plans for vote. You know, pick up your wings and then go watch the game. I think we are it's only us and Manassas that are open on October 19th, so that truly is kind of a Prince William area voting day. And then there's a couple of the other Northern Virginia counties, Fairfax, Falls Church, Arlington, do it the Sunday after that on the 26th. So,
I know there are a number of churches and fraternities and other groups that are really planning to do a big push for that Sunday voting.
Yeah.
So it's become, you know, a pretty popular thing.
Yeah, I think we've had food trucks over here the last couple.
Right.
They set up at the far end of the parking lot, and so there's some different groups do some special things on that day, and it's kind of cool because it kind of kicks off the sort of all the sites opening up. So it really is sort of a kickoff day for us, and then. It is really unique because on that particular Sunday, it's really just us and Manassas around the state that have voting. So I don't know, maybe we need to talk to the supervisors about a proclamation for Prince William County Voting Day or something on that day. So, but looking forward to that Sunday is always a fun day, a very positive day. We have a high number of poll books to ensure little to no wait times at early voting sites. During the presidential, we reconfigured some of our rooms to accommodate more poll books so that we can get more voters in and through in some of those locations. DMV and Haymarket both have 4 check-in stations at them and more voting booths to accommodate that. So we're going to stick with those numbers for this election since it's just for that last couple weeks. And I think that will help us make sure that if we do have crowds, that we will not have lines build up and we'll be able to move people through quickly. I mean, that was a real, I don't think we talked about that too much, but that was a real success of the operations team in the 2024 presidential, where we saw only really that Sunday and for the first couple hours, and then on the last Saturday when people sometimes wait to vote. Those were the only day where we really had lines that were any more than like 10 or 15 minutes. And I know that in 2020 we had some pretty significant lines, and I know we had, you know, cars around the corner from the DMV down to the Home Depot and traffic issues. So that was a real success last year. We want to continue to make sure that people can, if they do go early vote, that we can get them in and out quickly and safely and make the process as good as we possibly can with the facilities that we have.
Well, maybe we can get some press coverage. I remember several years ago, one Saturday where, maybe it was Sunday, where we were the only jurisdiction in all of Northern Virginia that had Sunday voting. So Channel 9 actually came down and talked to voters, and since nobody else in Northern Virginia is doing it, you know, we should do a media alert so they, you know, if they want to come down and, you know, do some discussions with voters on a Sunday, it's a good opportunity for them to do it.
We will follow up on that. That sounds good. Okay, officer staffing. We were talking about this a little bit ago. That the initial list, that 6-week list, was sent to the chairs already. More than 800 officers assigned. That exceeded the staffing goals set by the board. As Marcus alluded to, we do start with more officers than we need because as time goes on, because of health issues, family issues, people just decided they don't feel like it this year, whatever it might be. We do lose officers, especially in the last week, but throughout the whole process, there's always a assigning and reassigning and drop off of officers. It is herding cats for about 2 months for the election officer team. The breakdown at that time was 338 Republicans, 329 Democrats. We do have, I think, about 40 Republicans in backups. That's good. That is, you know, improving. Certainly when I got here, we, you know, we were low on Republicans. We assigned everybody we had, and then we just had to wait and see how far that was going to be behind the Democrats because we just didn't have enough people involved. So we are, you know, have made a lot of progress in that area. We're code compliant in the precinct leadership, so all of the precincts have one Republican and one Democrat as the chief and assistant chief, or vice versa. And we are very close on the precincts themselves at an individual level. As Marcus noted in the code, technically, when you have an even number, you're supposed to have an even number of officers. It's really hard to prep for that because you don't know who's going to drop off. So you start off with 4, 3, and 1, and sometimes that 1 drops off, and maybe you add a nonpartisan if you need 8, or you just leave it if you need 7, and you're good. Sometimes it's the opposite. You lose the smaller party you have there. You might lose that officer, and then need to either pull somebody out and add somebody in, or so it is a constant game that the staff is working on. So I know we are overall compliant in terms of the overall broad numbers. Every single precinct is within either even or within 1 officer of each party, and we have, I think it was about 23 that had even numbers that were 1 off. But I know that Dean and Rick have worked on that and have been, you know, ticking those off as we lose people. It's like, okay, well, that one's good then. So,
and I will add to that. Of those 23 precincts, 12 of those precincts, the Democrats had the +1, and in 11 of those, the Republicans had the +1. So even in the 23 precincts where we're not technically compliant with the code, again because of the insurance policy that we're implementing, both parties are still getting pretty equal treatment in terms of who has the extra person. And then obviously the Republicans have, you know, 9 more total officers than the Democrats, but I think historically the Republicans fall off at a more rapid rate as well. And so we should see those numbers start to get closer together as we get closer.
Yeah.
Fewer Republicans.
Well, and we have a pretty big bench on the Democratic side of things. So if we need another officer at a location, that is something that really can happen rapidly. Whereas, you know, when Marcus, you were talking about the 11 and the 12, I'm going to take a pretty strong guess, and I'm probably right that the 11 are somewhere in Brentsville or Gainesville on the Republican side, and then the others where we're short, where we have one more Dem are probably in, Potomac and Woodbridge and some of those areas. So that tends to be sort of it's not just a one-party challenge, it's both parties and its locations, and it's the team begging and pleading people to please go over to this location, because we don't need another person in your community, but we do, just across the way. So, yeah, that's looking really good for our overall turnout. This is through last Friday. We had about 12,809 voters. That's about 18% higher than 2021. I think it started off significantly higher than 2021. It's kind of come back towards the mean a little bit. I think that's been true for a lot of Northern Virginia. I think partly because I think Northern Virginia adopted early voting more often. We have seen early voting being at a higher percentage in 2021 in like the southwestern part of the state and some other parts of the state. But I think we're right where we expect to be at this point, about 4% turnout. And I think the updated numbers are, we've had a little over 10,000 male voters now, and we have had more than 4,000 early voters. So it's a really high number of mail ballots to be back this early. So that's more than a third of our mail ballots have already been returned by voters. It says 32% here as of last Friday, but that's now up to like 35 or 36% because we just processed another 1,000, a little over 1,000 more yesterday. So I think that prognosticators like to, in the media, like to talk about whether that is an advantage for your party or your all's party. I think it really more has to do with voting patterns though, because what you don't know when you're looking at that stuff is that a voter that was gonna vote on election day anyway, and they're just opting to vote early this time? So I think that there's a lot of speculation on that, and it's really hard to predict elections now and what the turnout's doing, because there's so many different ways to vote, and you don't know how. Are we getting a lot of early voters in a particular year because turnout is gonna be higher? Or are we just getting more early voters because more people are opting to use that because it's convenient for them? So that's all to say that there are a lot of conclusions that people jump to. All we can look at really is what the numbers are, and we won't know what that means until after the election is certified and done. So, but nice to see that we already have a significant portion, and we know that'll really ramp up once early voting goes. It just makes election day go a lot smoother and a lot easier without big crowds on election day. Final preparations for election day, just a schedule so the board is aware. There's Thursday through Saturday before election day. That's when the chief bags get picked up by the chiefs. On that final Sunday, the poll books are prepped. That we have to wait until early voting is complete so that all the data that we have at that point from who early voted can be loaded onto those poll books, since they are not connected to the internet on election day. On Monday, then the carts are delivered with all the equipment for the precinct, and we have modified that to, we actually have election officers that follow those truck routes now, just to provide an extra level of verification. Sometimes it helps because the delivery drivers or the companies might not necessarily be Prince William County people. They might not be specific to that area. So over the years, we've had a few times where we've had to we found out they had the wrong card at the wrong place. So this just gives us an extra level of verification. It also, they record, where the card's being delivered. So if there's anything special we need to know, like, hey, this is locked in the closet, so the officers don't get there and think there's no card here, they forgot to deliver our equipment. So, and then of course Tuesday at AM, the officers arrive at 5 a.m. So those are the major things to prep for election day that are still to come. Logic and accuracy testing for all processes has been completed. The board has done all of its homework to prep for this election in terms of the approving of all of our planning, with the exception of the officers that we have that are going to be approved today. Those I'm sure will help Rick and Dina fill in some spots that we have left and some of those drop-offs that we talked about. The post-election schedule, I think you all said this was okay, but if you look at this document that has the yellow stripes on it, so this would be the sort of post-election certification process where on the day after election day from 10 to 5:30 we'll do the canvass. I plan on us having that done in one day, so we don't have to come back a second day for a small amount of work. So I would guess we'll actually be done that at like 3 or 4, but if we need to go a little bit later, we've got it scheduled. You all have the provisional hearing from noon to 1 that day. You know, sometimes have a few people that show up for that. The CAP post-election is on that Friday and Saturday, the 7th and the 8th. Afterwards, board presence is not, you know, required, but always welcome at that, the final processing of the mail ballots. And then by Monday, November 10th, that's when the state's deadline to complete all the same day entry is. So we can't really proceed with the provisional meeting until that is complete. So the provisional meeting would then be on Tuesday, November 11th, which is a holiday, that is a Veterans Day. But we will still have some staff working. The office itself will not be open, but the board session and any observers that want to come in and the staff that need to be here for that will be in. And then that final Friday, by COB that day, the board has to certify the local election results for the state, and that certification will happen from 10 to 1 on Friday, November 14th. Then we would be done, barring a risk limiting audit, which there is, I think, a 7% chance Prince William County being selected. That's obviously a low chance. I don't know why. I feel like we're gonna get picked this time. I just feel like we're due. But the odds are against that happening.
So I think the audit this year is one House of Delegates district.
Yeah.
So, you know, I understand, I mean, to me, if you're gonna do that kind of audit, then at least pick, you know, either a statewide or a congressional or something. You know, I mean, if Prince William gets chosen, one of our delegate districts,
Yeah.
and that will be not a very representative sample. So I was sort of amazed that their audit is going to be limited to one House of Delegates district.
I was watching the state meeting because I couldn't remember what it was. I thought it was several that they picked.
Right.
Because yeah, we have several districts that are purely within Prince William.
Right.
And I think even in some of the smaller counties, I would guess that a lot of the delegate districts are only, you know, we saw a big one was it the congressional one last year where they had a whole bunch of counties that got picked. So
Right.
it was like 10 counties or
Right.
something like that were involved in it. But I would guess that even in some of the more rural areas, you're only gonna have like a 2, 3, 4 county district. So anyway, it's good we do it as a state and we do it, you know, every year. But we did that my first year, was it 2022? Or after the 2021 election.
Yeah.
So right after it, so we got selected for RLA. And I don't think we've done one since then?
We did one.
Or did we do one other one?
Residential.
Okay. That's right,
We did one
I forgot
last
about that,
year.
yes. They all blur together after a while.
And Natalia has promised that we're going to finish all those SDRs in one day.
I think you guys will get it done in one day. So the good thing on that day is the state doesn't get us that SDR report until noon. So I think Natalia's
I have a
gonna,
plan.
yeah, so Natalia's she's gonna get you guys to work at 10 o'clock on the things that don't relate to the SDRs. And then we'll get that report, and usually it's a pretty quick comparison, because usually it's only a couple of voters, especially in an election like this, that we'll have to cross-check. And then after lunch, you'll move into
Lunch?
same-day registration.
There's no lunch.
No lunch.
No lunch.
Snack.
Just gonna attach feed bags to them, like how are we gonna,
Yeah, what about?
they need to eat.
Working fasting.
We'll get you lunch. Natalia may not like it, but we'll get you lunch. All right. So does the schedule look, I think you guys said the email, I just wanted to go, okay.
Yeah.
So we will go ahead and post this by the end of the week here so that the parties have that in case they're planning to observe. And I will note that of these events, several of them are authorized observers. The Canvas event is open to the public, so we usually have good attendance in that. Especially if there's an election that's close, usually there's a lot more people that show up. If there's wide margins, then we get less. But that is a public event, so we welcome people to come participate not participate, but observe that process. We try to encourage a lot of the chiefs and election officers to come see that too, because they've come to that over the years, and I think they see, they get to maybe see how they did as a precinct, and realize maybe some of the small mistakes or issues that they had, or things that they can correct or do better in terms of their paperwork. So, okay, so that is settled. Okay, so election security, we're going to go into mail voting today, but I just wanted to comment on a few things related to this. So in terms of and we do have materials online that talk about election security, so if you're interested in that, there are paper copies in our office to pick up. There are PDFs online that you can research and learn more about it. I'm going to go through each area just very broadly here for most areas, and then we're going to talk about mail voting today. So the voter database does have limited access. Only staff have access to that, and even some staff don't have that. And the access that's granted is only limited to what people have to do. So if you're not someone that is processing voter registrations, then you're either not going to have access at all, or your access is not going to allow you to modify someone's voter registration. In Prince William County, we do more than 100,000 updates and mailings every year. So between the mail that we send out to confirm people's addresses, between all of the things where people, they have a name change, they move, whatever it might be, the state, has compared our data to other state or federal information to find out that we need to remove or update certain voters. So there are a lot. We have about 330,000 voters in Prince William County, and we do about 100,000 updates and mailings each year. So it's a little bit higher in the presidential years too. We do get updates from state and federal databases where they do comparative looks at some of that data to make sure that the information is not showing differences like moves or deaths. There are voting right limitations to certain statuses, so if you are an active voter, you can't get a mail ballot. You have to sign something when you go to the polling place to vote, an affirmation. So there are limitations when you move into an inactive voter, which is roughly a little less than 10% of our voters at any given time. And mostly that's people that have moved and not updated their information with our office. And then we have done board requests and research beyond that, the state requirements there, into things like non-citizens and a number of activities that the board has requested. So those are a lot of our security precautions as it relates to voter registration. On equipment security, I always tell people that we test every piece of equipment every election. I think people are always surprised by that. But when we're doing logic and accuracy tests for early voting, for mail voting, for election day, every single piece of equipment, we are going through a checklist of things to make sure really basic things like is the date and time correct on this machine, so that when we are printing receipts of the election, we know that the time is accurate, making sure the software version is correct, making sure we are running test ballots through all these machines to make sure that we're getting the results that we expect. We hand count those test decks before we run them through, and then we have the machine go through and do them. So all of those pieces of equipment are going through and getting tested each election. Our equipment all meets all state and federal standards that are required of us in Virginia. There are federal guidelines from the EAC, which the state uses to build its own certification, but the state is responsible for certifying equipment, so our equipment is all certified. The office reviews and complies with 150 state security standards every election, and the Electoral Board reviews security annually. So both of those items, we have a number of meetings where we talk about those things with the board. We look at areas where we need to improve. We make plans to make those improvements to make sure that we are fully compliant with all the requirements. The state has a whole ton of requirements that we have to meet, and then they have requirements that are, I guess you'd consider them the platinum level standards, where they're not a requirement for us to meet, but where they're good practices, and we meet more than, I think, 80% of those as well. So we're meeting all the required standards, and we're meeting most of the additional standards that are not even requirements. So that is all related to our election equipment security, and that relates to our infrastructure within the office as well. So we all have to go through training every year. This year we're doing it twice. on IT security to protect against things like spamming and malicious attacks. And then we have internal security policies as well. Cameras, access badging to get into certain rooms. When you're going through our office, we know who's in there, when they're going through doors, what time it is, all that information. And those are all things that we have upgraded over the last several years.
Sorry, one additional note on the equipment security.
Yeah.
On the transparency side too, and I think everybody probably knows this, that as we test all of that equipment is serialized, and the parties are invited to be there to witness the testing of all of that equipment. And all the equipment that is tested is assigned to precincts by serial number. And so it is traceable, right? That only the equipment that was tested actually shows up in a precinct, and the serialized equipment that was assigned to a precinct is in fact the equipment that is at that precinct. And so I think that's an important step of that security and transparency process, so that the public can be assured that the equipment that they see on election day is in fact the same equipment that was tested during LNA.
Yeah, we also, for a number of years now, we voluntarily, John does a great job scanning in all as we're going through and testing them. He builds a data set of all the equipment and what the ID numbers of the seals and the equipment itself is, and we go ahead and send that to the parties. It is something that the parties can FOIA and request, but we've just gone ahead and sent that to the party every year, so that when observers are going out there to the precincts and checking the equipment at the start of voting on election day, for example, or at an early voting site, they already have all those numbers, so they can go verify that the piece of equipment that is at Tyler Elementary School is in fact the same one on the sheet that's supposed to be at Tyler Elementary School.
That's very good, very good.
In-person voting, so this process, as we talked about officers for a little while here, is a process governed by bipartisan election officers. So we have an equal number or within one of the election officers in the precincts, and our precinct leadership is also bipartisan. You are required to have identification to vote in Virginia. There is a little exception to that where you can sign a document if you have forgotten your identification, or maybe you just moved and you don't have one. The number of people that do that in any given election is in the double digits, so it's not used significantly. Most people just use their driver's license. Poll books verify the voters and their status, so when voters are coming in and checking in, the officers are checking their information against the database to make sure that people are who they say they are, and that they live where they live, and the identification obviously helps with that as well. Our ballot scanners are offline, so that is in Virginia code, that ballot scanners can't be online on election day. Our ballot scanners actually lack the equipment, the hardware. They don't have modems in them, so they couldn't be connected to the internet without that hardware anyway. So that's actually a really nice feature. And it is allowed in some states. When I was in DC, that's how we actually sent back in our election results at the end of the day, was there was something in the scanner that would modem and send those results in, which was actually great from the standpoint of you got your election results really fast, but it does present some potential security issues. Again, either regardless of what that process is, that's why you have Canvas after the election to verify all those results with the paper receipts that come from those machines as well. And of course, we post those all online for the public to review. So if you want to do your own audit at home, you can. It's not how I would spend my weekend, but, well, actually, I guess it technically is how I spend my weekend. But I get paid to do that. So, but if you want to do that, you can. It's all available there for you. We have several years worth of elections now with all that information online. And we have multiple backups for every ballot cast. So when someone casts a ballot, we have the ballot itself, which then goes and lives in the courthouse and stays under their custody in case there's a recount or some other thing where it's needed or audit. The image of the ballot itself is then stored on the equipment as well, and the machine also counts it. So we have several backups for if there is some kind of problem with the ballots. If the courthouse were to burn down and all those ballots burned up, we still have the images of them, or vice versa. So a lot of measures in place there.
How,
So,
how long are those electronic images saved? I mean, are they, so after a certain period of time, Jackie will, shred all the ballots, what do we do with the electronic versions of those?
well, I mean, they would be under the same schedule as the paper versions would be. We might have some that are older than that, though, to be honest with you, because it's not the same situation. Jackie, I'm sure, is always happy to, they have space issues over there.
Right.
And I'm sure she's always happy to have, what is a set of boxes that takes up about a quarter of this room, out of that room for the other records that they have to keep, because they have so many. It's a little different when you're talking about digital records. It doesn't take up, much space, so it's not really an issue. So I'd have to check into that, Keith. I know we retain them for whatever the required schedule of record retention is. I don't know if we have some of the ones that are older, so can look at that and see what our digital retention schedule looks like. Okay, so gonna go into detail a little bit more about mail voting today. This kind of came up, you guys had some questions at the last board meeting, and we tried to answer those questions. I think we did by and large, but I wanted to give it a little better treatment so we can go into details and have some images here that will help with that as well. So there's a few securities to the mail voting process overall that I'm going to go into detail on. So first of all, there's a one-to-one ballot relationship. We're going to talk about that, that every voter has a ballot and there's a record of who has voted, and the ballots are linked to the voter, whether you have checked in at a polling place to get it or whether it's mailed to you. So we're going to talk about how that works in the mail voting process. Our envelopes that come back are actually verified 4 different times. Each time when they come in, we're going to talk about what that kind of looks like and how that process works with our office, with the election officers. Voters can track their ballots, so if any voter has a concern about, someone trying to steal their vote and fraudulently send in a mail ballot in their name, all voters have the ability to track their ballot and see what the status of it is. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. And then there's also a lot of issue resolution that happens with this. Most of the ballots that come back are the voter has done what they need to do. There's a ballot inside. They are registered as a voter. They put the right information. It all goes through fine. In a small percentage of situations, there's additional review that's required. There's potentially curing situations that happen. So we're going to talk about what that process looks like. And we actually reviewed that over the last month or so, and we kind of updated a flow chart that sort of has a better visual definition of how that works, which I think will be really helpful to people. These are complicated too. They're complicated for us. So I hope that as I'm explaining them well enough that people can understand them. We do have a How It Works series on our website. If you go to the research section of our website, that's one of our main tabs. There's the election security series that talks about election security issues, like I was just talking about a few minutes ago. And there's also the How It Works series, which helps explain each step in depth of what is happening from when somebody applies for a mail ballot, for instance, until it's actually counted towards the result in the elections and everything that happens in between. So I'd encourage people to check that out. I think it's a really good resource, and we've added that to sort of demystify it for people and make it easier to understand. So talking about, yeah.
Can I ask one question? I just noticed it at the bottom of that document. The ballot curing,
Yeah.
that term, I guess, was confusing to me at first. We don't actually cure ballots, right? We cure envelopes,
Correct.
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought that was the case. But you could see how the term would maybe raise some eyebrows.
Well, the ballot is in the envelope, so I see what you're saying. You're saying like that somebody is editing the ballot in some way. No, the ballot is sealed until at the time that the election officers have, approved it and gone through the process we're going to talk about, and at that point, then the ballot is scanned through.
I've heard that discussion before, and it was clear that the people talking about it didn't understand this process.
Yeah, maybe we'll just change that to curing so we don't cause any confusion. Okay, so the one-to-one ballot relationship. So ballots are only sent to qualified voters. I noted earlier that if you're inactive, if you're not registered, you can't get a ballot sent to you, obviously. And if you're an inactive voter, you also don't have the right to vote by mail ballot. You have to, update your registration or verify it prior to being eligible to vote by mail. Voter envelopes identify the recipient at every stage of the mail-out and return. So we're going to see some examples of that, because it's not just that the individuals who receive them are putting their name and filling out the form they have to fill out. The envelopes themselves have the information that tells us who this envelope went to and who it's coming back from prior to them doing anything. It's all on there. Envelope that secures voter secrecy. So there is we actually have a peel thing that then you just stick it down, which I think is a lot easier than sort of the lick envelopes. What happens is once you've filled out your form, you fold that down, and then the ballot is secure inside that envelope, but also the process we're going to talk about can be completed without changing or threatening the security of that envelope. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And the envelope allows the staff and officers to identify individuals along with PII. So what this looks like in terms of envelope security is when an envelope goes out, this is what a return envelope looks like on the front. And what it's going to have is it has a unique color to identify the jurisdiction, so that's a good security feature right up front. If we get an envelope these are mint green, correct? If we get an envelope that comes back that is not the mint green, or it's orange or it's purple, we not only can, it makes it really easy to pull that out right away, and we know that maybe the post office made a mistake and returned an Arlington ballot to us or a Fairfax ballot to us. It doesn't happen very often, but the color makes it very easy to identify those situations. Also, as soon as it comes in, you see at the bottom there's a little received with the stamp. It's upside down. That's just how they get stamped. But that gives us a custody record of it, and we have data sets that then tell us, hey, we've received this many ballots on this day, and then we have all the envelopes that actually have that stamp on them, so we know exactly when we've received it from the post office. On the back of the envelope itself, now once you when you return your envelope, this is what it's going to look like with the flap folded down and stuck on the bottom. We can still see that the flap does not cover the identity of the voter there. So what happens is the voter then, we will peel off that flap. So the only thing that we reveal at that point is what the voter has completed. And if you see that little red tab on the side there, that is an additional piece of tape we put on just to make sure that the envelope doesn't rip or anything like that in the process, so that the secrecy of the ballot is maintained. So the officers are used to seeing that when the envelope comes to them. So the voter would fill out their information when they return their envelope, and then we can see whether that matches the voter or not. So if we do have an envelope that has the printed name of the voter in the bottom corner, and a different voter has sent that back in, that raises a flag, obviously, and then we have a process for that, which we're going to talk about when we talk about issue resolution. There's also personal identifiers to prevent fraud. So the state passed a law a few years ago that said voters used to have a witness signature. They got rid of that. Honestly, that probably wasn't much of a security feature, because you don't identify who the witness is on the thing. So it's really easy just to scribble something on there yourself if you wanted to, and there's nothing to verify it against in any way. So now you have to put your year of birth and your social security number on there. So when we're talking about voters trying to send back like somebody else's ballot, first of all, you're getting the ballot that's designated for someone else. So that envelope is going to tell us that this person should not have received a ballot. Second of all, you'd have to actually know the information of that person. So if you did get your neighbor's mail, you'd have to have their last four of their social security number, which I don't know any of my neighbors' social security numbers, but you'd have to get the wrong ballot in the first place, just a sort of a happenstance to happen, which does happen sometimes. But then you'd also have to know their information, and then we'd have to miss the fact that this envelope is with a different person. So all of those things would have to happen for someone to try to attempt to fraudulently vote a mail ballot. So a lot of things would have to fall down and fall into place for that to happen. It would be exceedingly difficult and unlikely for it to occur.
So-
We also have a barcode that verifies and adds efficiency to this process so that we can scan and pull up that voter's information and profile in the computer. So again, as a staff member or an officer is going through and they're scanning this and seeing this voter's information, they're going to immediately see on their screen who the voter is, and they would then compare that to the information there.
So I'm sorry, going back.
Yeah.
This is a small thing, but
Yeah.
the zip codes don't match. So what kind of information that doesn't match is enough to, you know, I mean, maybe a zip code isn't.
Oh, I didn't match it when I wrote up this example, and I didn't match the zip code on there, but it's a good
catch,
question.
Ivy.
But the point is, at what point is, you know, mismatched information
Yeah.
enough to trigger, oops, this might not be.
The code is very specific about this. Natalia, do you want to
we
give
do
the
have
list?
material emissions, so there is a list, it is in the code, it calls material emissions, so that's something that we have. I will be more than happy to email it, we can add it to this presentation as well, but it's very specific, it tells you what has to be, you know, present on that envelope. To your specific, to answer that, it's actually, if either city or zip code is listed, that is enough. So if they put Woodbridge, they don't even have to put Virginia. If they put Woodbridge but miss the zip code, that is enough for us to identify. Again, it's all done to be able to identify voter in the system. If the zip code is there, a lot of people in that Woodbridge area, they would put Lake Ridge instead of, you know, or some out Montclair and put the right zip. So that is perfectly fine for us as well. But that's a great question. There is a material omission. So we're not just, you know, like we want to accept this one, but we won't accept this one. No, it's all black and white. There is no room for guessing or anything like that.
I think the vast majority of the problems that we see or the omissions that we do see are signature missing, social security number missing, year of birth missing.
Correct.
I don't know what percentage
I
of,
have it pulled up.
yeah, she can
I
probably
knew
pull it
they,
back
I knew you would ask.
down. But those are the most common things we see. It's just people forgetting to complete certain sections of it. I think they're mostly innocent mistakes. What's the total for?
So you have 32% of that is the actually name, no voter signature, pardon. So they did not sign the envelope. So right over there where the signature line is, that is missing. So that's 32%. And the next highest is 27%, and that's last 4 digits of the social security number, either missing or incorrectly filled.
Yeah. So if that information is wrong or missing, then it gets triggered. And we'll talk about this in the issue resolution, but we have a cure log that has all of the issues identified by the voter, what the issue was, what our communication level has been with them, which is, you know, calls and letters and emails to them if they have an email address on file, to tell them about the issue so they can try to resolve it. Because most of the time it's just the person filled it out, they literally just forgot to sign it, or they overlooked the, you know, the social security number. But it's,
Or filled out husband's social security
Yeah,
number because
yeah.
they know it better for some reason.
so when we have those situations arise, that is all in the cure log, that is provided to both parties so that not only can they see exactly, it lists what the reason is in all of those instances. So not only can they see that, but then the parties will often contact their particular voters and say, hey, we need you to, you know, correct your ballot. And I think we get about 65% of those that have a cure do end up correcting it, which is up significantly. It used to be about 40%. So we have really increased the communication with those voters, and to help them make sure that they can cast their ballot, because most of these are just innocent paperwork mistakes of, oh, I made a mistake and I overlooked that field and I forgot to, so I filled out all the information and I just forgot to sign the form. And we try to review that also in the office to see, okay, what things are people messing up that are more than just like an occasional thing? Do we need to redesign the form at all? We've had a slight uptick in the number of missing signatures this year. And if we looked at it, we're like, well, that space is just a little bit smaller, so people might just be overlooking it. I mean, and I'm talking about a lot. I'm talking about that's happening like on 1.3% of the envelopes instead of 0.9%. So these are all really small percentages. But we do look at those things after an election to see, hey, do we need to modify our design of this a little bit just to make it as easy as possible? In any process where you ask people to fill out paperwork, you're gonna have a certain percentage of mistakes. And in this instance, by the code, some of those mistakes can cost you your ballot if you don't get it corrected. So that is also a reason that we always encourage people to, you're gonna get a mail ballot, get one early in the election process, return it as early as you can. That way if there's a problem, it'll be identified and you'll know about it, so you have time to correct
I
it.
just had one thing.
Oh, yeah.
As far as the notifications, one thing that, why we're encouraging people to sign up, or the mail voters to sign up for ballot tracks, it's an automatic notification as well, so that they will get either email, if they provided email to ballot tracks, they will get text message, they can get phone call, so it, kind of send all those messages to those, whatever the preferred method of contact for them. So it goes instantaneously. As soon as we put the data in, it's in there. So it notifies them, hey, I need to fix my ballot, more information coming via mail, email, phone call. So yeah, it's that's another way we contact them as well.
Yeah.
And that information that's available in that window, that is a piece of paper that they put inside the envelope, right, that you're looking at?
It's part of the envelope. So they just fill out the envelope, and then the part that you're seeing there above that, where it says press along the green bar, that whole thing is a flap.
Okay.
That comes down. So when we get it, it looks like this, and then our staff tears that little flap off. It's a perforated flap, so the staff tears that flap off so that we can see the voters' information, but then we can't see what their ballot is at all.
But that information is part of the envelope, not something that's inside the envelope? What the voters...
In the bottom
filled
left
out?
corner?
No, but everything that the voters filled out there, is that a piece of paper that's inside the envelope?
No, it's the back of the envelope.
So there's no chance that they put something in incorrectly and that's not visible?
Right.
Good.
Yeah, and yeah, you occasionally will have somebody who will like put something, like maybe, but we wouldn't even discover that until after the election if they put something in the envelope because they're sealed.
Right.
So they're either going to be, if they put something additional in there, they're either going to be counted, and at which point we would discover they're going to be counted, but you wouldn't get that through the whole process until the end. So, okay, so in terms of verification of these envelopes, so we do an initial scan of the completed information on that form. That's the first check. Staff then double checks all fields, so they get checked twice to make sure they're complete, they're accurate, they're matching. That's when we identify the cures. And this is important not only to make sure that voters have completed all their required fields, but also that we identify any missing or inaccurate information as soon as we can so that we can contact that voter and see if it's a mistake that they made, is there a registration issue that they have, whatever it might be. And then after that's done, the election officer teams, they're doing another check with it. So that's the point at which we do pre-processing and cap. Those officers are going through, doing that same process again, checking in the voter into the poll books that they use during that process. And then if everything is good, then they're separating the ballot from the envelope at that point, and then that's getting scanned on the high-speed scanner. It's not tabulated, obviously, prior to election night, but we go ahead and scan those in. So here's what that looks like. That field there again, initially scanned, just as sometimes we just see, okay, they didn't fill out the year of birth and the social security number. They missed those two fields. Pull that one out right away, get it in the cure log. Then there's 2 steps of verification with the officers, and then with the staff, and then another one with the officers. And the staff have to check, the elect has put out a procedure for checking the social security numbers. The officers do not have access to that level of PII. So the elects put out administrative guidelines for how we handle that then, to make sure that it gets verified, but then also that we're not giving election officers access to people's personal information. So that's left to the very limited people that can access and use Verus for those purposes. So once we have done those steps for the staff at least, we stamp the envelope so that we can notify the officers in the final step that this has in fact been checked, verified, and entered into Verus. And then we match the database and the envelope to make sure that not only did they complete, is the information correct in the window, but also is this person's envelope? So we verified that as well. We noted earlier, voters can track their own ballots, so any mail voter can sign up for free for this service. It gives you either emails and or text updates. You can get one or the other or both. Those happen in real time, so as soon as your ballot is leaving Washington State and heading to your address at the start of this process, you're getting a text message that says your ballot is on its way, and that goes all the way through the process from when it arrives in our office, when it gets checked in, when the officers have gone through and actually counted your ballot. So you're getting updates at all of those stages to let you know what's happening. We have a permanent absentee list is probably around 25,000 people right now in Prince William County. It varies and it changes. People add to and cancel from that on a daily basis. But we have more than 7,500 mail voters, so that's almost a third of the voters that get a mail ballot are getting these kind of tracking services. We've had more than 4,000 people sign up for this in just the last year. And we added something, that flap that comes off that we use to see, to verify the information underneath. The back of that flap, we added what's in the picture here, which is if you'd like these services, if you'd like updates, then just put your cell phone number here. So the teams that are doing that are then pulling those off, and any of the ones they're checking to see if it has a cell phone number, and if it does, then we're adding them to the list for updates. So we've already gotten more than 500 people just this election that have added on to the services. So just something to make it a little easier for people to get signed up for that so they can track their own ballot. The last part here, the complicated part, is issue resolution. So the curing process that we've talked about, we have to communicate with voters who've made a mistake or have some kind of ballot or envelope issue. Again, ballot issue meaning an issue with the envelope. Specifically, parties are sent this log each week, so they're aware of not only who those voters are, but what is the individual situation with each voter. Did they forget to sign it? Did they put their information in correctly on their envelope? Maybe their name changed, whatever it might be. And then I have to review certain situations. And how this works is usually, we have about 96% of our ballots that come through. They've been filled out completely. The information is correct. It matches the envelope. Everything's good. Standard cures, meaning they forgot to put their social security number on there, or they forgot to sign the envelope. That's probably about 3 to 4% of the issues. And then non-standard issues, like the one we're going to talk about in some of these, that's less than 1% of the process. So this is our flow chart. If you can't read it, don't worry, I'm going to zoom in. But this is to give you an overview of what this process looks like and the different things that happen after it comes back to our office. So we receive these ballots and then they're reviewed by our staff and the election officers. And I would say the vast majority of cures get identified by the staff, but sometimes, something goes through and the officers catch it and then it goes into cure at that point. So like I said, multiple layers, but most of the time it gets found out up front. So meets the code requirements, 96% of the time, like I said, roughly. It meets all the code requirements. That ballot is then going to be accepted, go through that forward verification process like we talked about, and then that ballot will be scanned in to be part of the results on election night. Most common issue, about 3 to 4%, depending on the election. The required information box was missing or doesn't match. So any of these items here, social security number, year of birth, the name, the address, the signature if it's missing. The reissued ballot, but they didn't put a gold form in there. Somebody didn't provide the needs assistance form that we had to send that to. That's a voter that needs assistance technically to complete the process. They're supposed to fill out that form so we know who assisted that voter with the process. And if any of these come in, the process for this then is it gets entered in the cure log. The voter then gets notified. And then as the election goes on, that ballot is either cured, at which point the officers will review it and accept that ballot, we have a form that the voters usually complete for most of these, that they get sent, and they can return it via email, they can mail it back to us, whatever is most convenient for them. If it's not cured, meaning we contact the voter several times, we tell them that, hey, look, you didn't put your social security number on here, your ballot's not gonna count unless you fix this. They never do. That ballot ultimately gets rejected once the deadline has been reached. So it's a small percentage. Like I said, this is only about 3 to 4% of our overall ballots, and almost 2/3 of the time, people cure those, but there is a small percent, there's a percentage of that small percentage that don't resolve it, and per the code, we have to reject those ballots. So those are the straightforward ones. That is 99% of the ballots fall in one of those two categories. So these other ones are a little trickier and get pretty specific, but they're pretty rare. So a voter is not eligible. So this would be an example where maybe they filled out the envelope correctly and all that information is correct, but maybe they moved out of Prince William County. So the poll book doesn't have them in it, or there's some issue there. Maybe their registration got canceled in the middle of the election. So we notify the voters, and the voters' ballot is not gonna count in that instance, particular to whatever the move rules are and whether they're eligible to vote in that election or not. So it doesn't happen too often, but sometimes that does take place. The voter already voted, so we have a record in our system that indicates that this person voted. That can be, they sent back a mail ballot. So as an example, a voter might call us and say, I lost my ballot, I don't know where it is. I think it's in this mail pile, but I don't know. Can you guys send me another ballot? We follow through on that request. If they send both ballots back, and one of the challenges with the Virginia voting process is that this extended period of early voting and the mail ballots going out so long before the election, I think you have people that legitimately complete their ballot when they get it at that 45-day mark and maybe forget. And then because I've seen people come into the polling place at early voting and say, I think I voted this election, but it was a while ago and I'm not sure. And they ask if we can check and see if they've voted or not. So in the instance that somebody does go in and early vote, or somebody has already mailed back a ballot, when we go to review that ballot, when it's sent to us, if there's a second ballot, or if somebody has early voted and they then send back their first ballot, we then review that. And that is the point at which those all come through me at that point. So this is not many ballots any given election, it's a handful, if that. And in some instances, so some examples from last November, we referred some cases to the Commonwealth's attorney because we found, hey, this person sent in 2 ballots, and we don't know if that was just an accident on their part or if it was intentional. So if that's the case, then we refer to the Commonwealth's attorney, and they have to do at that point it's out of our hands. We provide what information we have. They decide whether they're going to investigate and prosecute or not. And that's in their hands at that point. There also are instances, though, last election we had referred someone to the Commonwealth's attorney and then discovered that it was actually an election officer mistake that had happened. Somebody with an extremely similar name had voted at an early voting site, and the officer had checked in the wrong voter, and so we accepted the ballot and we went back and changed the voter credit for the voter that had actually checked in there rather than the voter that was not, that we thought was trying to vote twice. So these are ones that we have to really do some additional research in and find out what the issue is. And I think in that instance, we use the actual log from the poll books. We contacted the voter that we thought had come in to vote and confirmed with them that they had come to vote that day, and we corrected the voter credit from the voter that had been checked in incorrectly to the voter that actually had checked in there. So some of these situations in rare instances do require a lot of extra work to kind of figure out, is there a potential crime here, or is there an officer mistake that created this? So we have to kind of be careful when we have these situations. And thankfully, a lot of the data that we have now really gives us a lot of information that helps us with those scenarios. Let's see.
Could you go back one slide? So
Yeah.
the needs assistance form. So is that something that goes out to everybody who requests an absentee ballot, or only if, when they request the absentee ballot, they say, I need assistance to mark it?
Correct. There's a box they check on that form when they apply that say that there's someone that needs assistance. And if they do, that's fine, but we do have to send the form in that instance. And our vendor is set up so that they know when that's a specialized insert, and our vendor is set up so their line, when they're printing these off, knows this ballot doesn't need one, this ballot doesn't need one, this ballot needs an insert, it pops it in, and then it keeps going. So there are specialized inserts. That's really useful too, not only for things like that assistance form, but if we have, let's say, I don't know, maybe there's a candidate change and it only affects one magisterial district. We could actually add a notice to the ballots that notifies voter of that, you know, that, like, hey, this voter has dropped out of the race. We can do that either universally, or we can say this only affects ballots that are being mailed to precincts, you know, 106, 107, 108, 109, and then those voters would get that specific notice. So it's a really good system, and it does let us specifically send those forms just to the people who have said that they need them.
So if I say I need assistance, and I get the ballot mailed to me, and I fill it out myself, and nobody else helps me, and I send it back, what happens then with my ballot? Is it,
So
Go ahead, yeah.
as long, if you don't need assistance, you requested assistance, but you didn't use it, you do not have to return that form. It becomes crucial when the voter cannot, they have disabilities where they can't sign.
right?
As soon as they put on that envelope, unable to sign, that assistance form is required, because they, at that point, that assistant has to provide their information, and they have to fill out who they are and everything else, and also put unable to sign. So we have that documentation going along with that ballot.
So Marcus will remember this. So last year, we had a situation where several people were concerned that an elderly parent had requested a mail ballot, and that they weren't sure whether their parent had actually marked it and sent it back, or whether it was a social worker in their assisted living. There were, and I assume it's a very small number that actually request the assistance form. So what happens with those? Do we follow up with them, or we keep them, or how?
The forms that actually
The
get filled out and
assistance
sent
form
back?
that's
I
sent
mean,
back.
we keep the records of
Yeah,
those,
they have a record. Those blue forms, they are collected during the time of pre-processing, so they stay with pre-processing team. So yes, they collected all forms, whatever requirement information, required documentation has been requested. Either it's a gold form, needs assistance, or when we have a HAVA ID required during federal election years, everything stays with us for the record keeping. Yes, we do have them.
I think that is a challenge. I know the board's talked about that before, in terms of people that are getting assistance from people that are outside, like their family or a professional caregiver, and what sort of influence they might, I think that's definitely a senior problem. That, that's probably a legislative issue. We haven't seen too much of that, but I know we did have a referral, a legal referral related to that in the presidential election for someone that called and complained that they felt like their elder parent was potentially influenced by that person. So that's difficult for us to know. All we can do is refer in that situation. But I don't think there's anything in the law that really addresses that specifically, and perhaps there could be.
So one other question. So the log that with the returns, or the thing that's on the website, so it showed that there were 624 undeliverable ballots that were returned to us. So what happens with those ballots that come back?
Do you want to answer? Sure. So we actually, that's something that we did in our jurisdiction, we're not required to do anything, but we do log in those ballots as being undeliverable. We do send them notification if there is a forwarding address provided on the envelope. The letter goes to that forwarding address and we say, hey, it seems like we received an undeliverable piece of mail. It seems like you need to update your registration with the form and envelope, return envelope attached to it. So they're able to make that address change, cancel out, whatever the circumstances are. So that actually has increased our clearness of our roles. We get a lot of those returned to us and we take care of them timely. So we do have that record. And of course, in the meantime, we are, because it is an election mail that came back undeliverable, it is logged in our system. So it generates that confirmation mailing flag, which means as soon as the time for elect comes to mail those confirmation notices, that person would be one who would receive that notice based on where they're located, somewhere in Virginia. Then they will receive one notice. If they're outside of Virginia, they will receive two notices, one to that new out-of-state address and one to their residential address. And within 30 days, if they don't confirm, then of course they will become inactive and the process starts there.
Yeah. So in most situations, you tell me if this is not fair to say, but in most situations, we're marking that undeliverable. So it's marked for confirmation in the system. Before the next election is going to happen, because they're marked for confirmation, they're going to get a notice from elect, and then if they don't respond to it, then within 30 days, they're going to be put on the inactive list, which both changes their voter registration status, but also then they're not automatically, but then we go through and we remove each time elect does the confirmation mailings and we have a certain number of voters that become inactive, they're cross-referenced for if they are on the permanent absentee list, and then they're removed from the permanent absentee list since they're an inactive voter, and since we have mail that's coming back, we're assuming at this point that they have moved, and because of their voting status, they're not eligible to receive a mail ballot any longer. So it's good the state does that twice a year now, because that means that when that happens during an election, before you hit the next primary, the next general, whichever it is, you're having that process happen so that you're not sending another mail ballot to that voter the next election, assuming they've moved. I mean, I should say too, it could be a situation where there was a mail issue, they contact us and they say, yeah, I've been having postal problems and it shouldn't have come back to us. But the majority of the time, it's people that have, they've moved away, they didn't update their registration and they didn't, delist themselves from the thing, but that process will do that in the subsequent months before the next election happens. So it's good that process happens twice a year now.
And if they don't respond to the confirmation mailing, they move to the inactive list, removed from permanent absentee status.
Yes.
And then if they don't either update their registration or show up in person with a valid ID to vote over 2 federal elections, then your registration is canceled.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And if they're in that status and they do show up in person, this is an exception, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, to the identity confirmation statement. That's not an option for those folks, right? They have to show an ID.
They have to sign an affirmation of eligibility at that point to state that they are.
Besides the ID, they have an additional paperwork
In addition
to fill out
to the ID.
affirming, and that's a big piece of.
But they don't have to prove it,
proof.
right? They could show up and sign an affirmation of eligibility.
Mm-hmm. And show
And
the
then
ID.
but even without an ID, sign an ID confirmation statement, and those 2 pieces of paper would allow them to vote?
Yes.
Yeah. That seems, I know that's the code, but that's, as we talked about before, that's kind of,
Yeah, it's rare. I mean, we know that the number of voter confirmation statements we get each election is a small number.
Yeah.
So, but yes, you could do that.
So the question was asked how many needs assistance. I think Keith asked, it's a little bit over 1% of those mail ballot would get needs assistance request.
Okay, so our next one here is the ballot envelope came damaged beyond use. So we get this every once in a while where an envelope is shredded such that we can't even verify the information on it, or whatever it might be. It's not often, but I'm sure you've all gotten a piece of of mail that was mangled and destroyed. And again, so this is just a less common cure situation, but it does go in the cure log. We do notify the voter, and then we do, in this instance, we do reissue a ballot to this voter automatically because we're not going to be able to count this ballot. In this instance, the ballot has usually been destroyed or whatever in that process, or damaged beyond use. So that's the only difference there, is that we automatically are reissuing another ballot, whereas with the cure process, we don't automatically reissue another ballot unless it's requested specifically by the voter that they'd like to do that process.
My dog ate my homework. My dog ate my homework.
Yeah, exactly. This is the "my dog ate my homework" category.
And we don't really discover that there is the instances where there's no ballot in the envelope. We don't discover that right until the election officers at CAP.
Right.
They're strict to it.
Unless you can feel
Yes, so if they put like, some voters, they do like to put their ballot wrap inside, then yes, we won't be able to discover it until they actually physically open. But you do, when you deal with ballots a lot, and our team downstairs, they vested, they're good, they passed the test and everything else. They can feel if there's an additional piece of paper inside, and if you put it like this, this is actual example of the envelope, you can see that it's red. So when we see that red, we know there's nothing inside. So we can clearly say that there is nothing inside. So we were able to detect about 3, I think, or 4 at this point. The voters did forget to put their ballot. We contacted them and said, yeah, sure, I did. Thank you very much for taking care of it in a timely manner. So, yes.
Give humans a process with 6 or 7 steps in it, and a certain percentage will fail along the way there.
They
so.
still concentrate on filling out this information
Yeah,
correctly.
yeah.
They forget the most important thing.
Yes. Well, there's also people out there that have, disabilities and are dealing with different situations. So sometimes they are honest mistakes. I'm sure we've all filled out a form incorrectly at one point or another. So. But the good thing is there's a process by which they can get notified of that, especially if they're on that automatic text message. Then they're getting a notification right away, and they have an opportunity to correct that mistake. All right, so here's the one, and this is sort of the example you guys were asking about the last time. So this is when the ballot packet is completed by a different voter. So we open up that flap, and our example there was Jane voter, and we open up that flap, and it's John voter, or it's Raymond Michelson, or somebody that's like, this is not the voter we expected to fill out this envelope based on who it's sent to. So we have a couple things that happen with that, because in one instance this we can count this, and that would be if it's the same address. So this is usually like husband and wife, son and daughter. They're at the same address. They both got mail ballots. And they probably made a mistake. They probably had them out, and they grabbed one, and they filled it out, and they didn't realize that it was the other person's name on it. So if this happens, and both individuals requested the ballot, and both individuals are at that same address, so again, usually a family member, then we're going to notify both voters in that instance, but we are going to count that ballot. So if Marcus and his wife both receive mail ballots, and Marcus grabs the wrong envelope and sends it back, we are going to count that ballot, because at that point we have a legitimate voter, who has requested a ballot at their address, who has filled out the form correctly. So per the code, this voter hasn't technically done anything wrong. They've used the wrong envelope, which we use to identify obvious situations of fraud, but they really just made a mistake here. So we're gonna count that ballot. We're also going to notify both voters. Hey, you sent the wrong envelope back, make sure you watch that next time. And also notify whoever the other person in that household is that has a ballot, so they know, hey, the wrong envelope got sent back, we can resend you a new one. You can use the one because you're at the same address and you're a qualified voter who requested one. So that's the one instance where it's like, it's okay. If it's a different address, so that scenario we talked about earlier where, Marcus requested a ballot and his neighbor accidentally got all his post from that day, and his neighbor thought, oh, they're just sending people their ballots now. I guess this is a new service I was unaware of, or maliciously, haha, I've got Marcus's vote, I'm gonna vote for him. In either of those instances, whether it's innocent or it's nefarious, that's gonna get pulled aside here. So if you have a different address on that form than what's on there, then we are going to put that in the cure log, we're gonna notify the voter, we're gonna reissue to the original voter that was supposed to go, to Marcus, we're gonna say, hey, somebody sent back your ballot. It wasn't you that filled out the form, and we know that, so we just want to let you know we're going to send you back a new ballot so you can still vote. Your maybe mistaken or nefarious neighbor is going to get a review of whether they tried to commit fraud or something like that. So that goes to me to review and do research on it. And then we'll look at things like, well, did this person actually, maybe they requested a ballot and they got 2 envelopes, one which was theirs and one which wasn't theirs, and they just made a mistake. Or maybe they have never applied for a mail ballot and they shouldn't have, been doing this. So we're gonna obviously reject that ballot for someone that has not requested. If you haven't requested a mail ballot, it's gonna get rejected. And in this instance, we're gonna review it because we wanna make sure that someone didn't try to commit fraud. So this splits off here because one of the bottom row there of different address is the intended recipient. So in our example here, that's Marcus. We're gonna reissue a ballot for Marcus. And then Marcus's neighbor is the ballot returner, and we're gonna reject that ballot, and then we're gonna do some subsequent research with this particular voter. Those are all situations where the individuals had requested a ballot, though both individuals had requested one. I guess I should clarify that. This neighbor of yours had requested a ballot, but they sent back the ballot that was intended for you. The other group here is ballot was not requested. So the bottom prong of this thing is we get back an envelope and it has Marcus's name on the bottom of it, but this person that filled out the form, they have not even requested a mail ballot. Maybe they're not even a voter, whatever it is in that scenario. This person shouldn't have received a ballot, so we're definitely not going to count this ballot. So we will talk to the intended recipient. Again, we would contact Marcus, hey, it looks like your ballot never made it to you. And we put this in the cure log, we're going to notify the voter, and we're going to do a reissue in this instance to get the ballot to the correct person. And then the ballot returner, again, same situation, we're going to put that into GR review. We're going to see if that needs to be a referral to the Commonwealth's attorney, if some fraud has possibly been attempted, but the ballot is ultimately going to get rejected and deleted. That's a Varus function there. We don't actually delete the ballot, but in Varus, we delete the ballot so that there's not, when we send you that reissued ballot, we don't then get back that ballot and go, he already tried to vote this election and we don't want you to get referred to the Commonwealth's attorney because you didn't, for something you didn't do wrong. So it's a little bit complicated, and again, this is not a very common scenario. The most common one here is ballots requested in the same household, people that are most likely family members mix up their envelopes and they send back the wrong one, but they've technically they requested an envelope, they filled out the form correctly and completely, and they sent it back to us. So in that instance, we're going to count that. In all these other scenarios, we've got a little more work to do to see that the person who was intended to get this ballot knows that their ballot never made it to them, if they haven't contacted us about that already, and get them a new ballot issued, and also to find out, do more research, and look at the person who was returning that ballot, and making sure that, one, we're definitely not going to count that ballot, but also that if there's subsequent action, we need to take regarding that person. So those can be challenging too, because in some of those situations, it's like, well, I could call this voter and see if maybe they just made a mistake and they didn't realize that that wasn't their ballot and they received it by accident. But it's probably more appropriate in a lot of those instances for the Commonwealth's attorney to investigate, because if you did try to commit fraud and I call you and you go, oh yeah, I just made that's not for me to, I'm not an investigator. So these can be a little bit challenging in terms of what level of communication is appropriate with someone that returned one that was never on the list in the first place. Although obviously anybody who's on that list, a qualified voter who has requested a mail ballot timely, we do want to communicate with those voters. So that is how that whole tree works, and I hope that helps people understand that both, one, I remember some stuff during the 2020 election where they talked about a bag of ballots on the side of the road. And I heard that like headline from somewhere. And as an election administrator, you go, well, that doesn't mean anything. A bag of ballots on the side of the road is probably ballots that were already voted, that somebody, I think that actually happened, I read an article about that last year, where an officer was returning their materials from the election, and I guess something fell out of their car. Well, those ballots had already been counted, and they have images of those, like I mentioned earlier. But also, if somebody brings in a bag of ballots, we're not just gonna go, all right, run them through the machine. There's a one-to-one relationship with any ballot, with any voter, and there's a process, whether it's election day, early voting, or mail voting, where we have verification processes in place, where we have review processes in place, and there's, obviously a very complex process that we have to have a flow chart like this to make sure that we are not upholding the rights of all the voters while also making sure that any voter who's attempting to try to do this fraudulently is caught, and that most importantly, their ballot is not going to get counted in those instances. So, as I noted, the most common thing here is that they meet the code requirements, or they've made some, just little snafu or dumb error that I forgot to put my social security number on there. I can't believe I did that. I've been voting for 3 elections and I've never had that problem, but it does happen. So, but in those other instances where we have, things that happen, we have a process in place internally, both for making sure that the original voter gets their ballot and has the right to vote, and also that the voter who should not have the right to vote, at least by mail, that ballot is not going to be counted in those instances. So I hope that explains the questions that you all had, but also makes it a little clearer for maybe somebody that's watching this. And I would encourage you all as board members in your partisan communities, and also anybody that's watching, send this 15-minute segment to somebody if they really want to know how this works. You get kind of a breakdown of how all these processes work and the things that are in place to do that. It's not to say that fraud isn't attempted. It can be sometimes. I think it's extremely rare, but it can be attempted. That's not to say there aren't ways you could successfully do that if you happen to get your neighbor's mail, if you happen to know their social security number, and you happen to want to submit a vote that wasn't yours. That would be a really rare set of both intentions and circumstances that would all have to align for someone to do that. And you'd have to risk, a year in jail and other things just to try to add one more vote to, again, a process that's not likely going to change anything. So
I think where it's more likely, or at least more feasible or possible, whatever term you want to use, is like the instance Keith was talking about, where you have certain scenarios where there's a person or a small group of people who have access to the PII of numerous people, like an assisted living facility or even a church for that matter. It's possible, right? Where I think we saw an instance 1 or 2 elections ago where there was a particular assisted living facility that basically had requested absentee ballots for everybody in the facility, if I remember correctly. And I'm not saying they did this, but theoretically it's possible because they have the patient information for everybody that lives there. It would be possible for somebody that works at that facility would have all the information they need to fill out every one of those ballots. Yeah. And so that's the concern. I'm not saying that happens, but that's where I think it would be most likely to happen if it were going to.
Well, and you can have those kind of scenarios in person voting too, and in familial relationships. But this can be overt. This could be, a domineering spouse who, I got your mail ballot, I filled it out for you, and I sent it back. Yeah. Or it can be subtle, and we do have laws around that because there were, especially in the past, but continue to be situations where, crime families, union bosses, family members, different relationships that are in the code for people that are not allowed to assist other voters, and probably an awkward thing that we have husbands and wives that come into the voting booths, and sometimes our officers have to say, you guys can't talk to each other here. And to most people, they say, well, that's ridiculous. Of course I could talk to my wife. But the reality is that there are some marriages where someone's trying to influence, I want you to vote for this person. And that, where there is violence and concerns. And so there are laws around that, and there are situations where, yeah, people could do undue influence on people, and that can be either overt attempts at fraud, or it can be softer. It can be relationship pressure, things like that. So some of those things are in the laws, and some of them are not.
And just to add, I mean, I understand concerns, but that's why, first of all, we do encourage to sign for those notifications. So you know when your ballot arrives, you know when your ballot is coming, you know all those things. And of course, our AB team, they watch for, you know, unusual activities. If you see 50 ballots that showed up from a facility and they all have handwriting, the same handwriting, and there's no needs assistance from, I mean, you know, they pick up little things. So something that doesn't look right gets triggered and brought to Eric's attention, so we can review and look at those things when we make phone calls when the ballot is in the curing process because something wasn't completed. Same thing. I mean, we get the feedback from whoever the voter is if there's something suspicious there or whatever. So we track all those things. We can't, I wouldn't say tell everything, but we try to see for those red flags, and we're on the lookout.
Yeah, no system is perfect, and we are working within the confines of what the code permits.
Yeah.
It's what we have to do.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge, especially, you know, for the people who sit at the top of the heap, you guys, and to some degree us. So thank you, first of all, thank you for putting that together.
Yeah.
That answered a lot of questions for me. If you could go back to the last slide.
Thank you guys for the questions. I think, you know, it provided us an opportunity to go back and refine some of our internal processes as well. So I think we made some improvements to some of our, the result for the voters and the process is the same, but I think we improved some of our, by re-talking through this, and I think we improved some of our internal communications on this to make sure that everybody's on the same page, and I think it was good exploration, which,
So yeah, top one, ballot requested, you said the most common scenario, nope, sorry, the next slide. That top
oh,
line.
the first one, yes, yeah.
Nope, the last one, two down. Next.
This
there,
one?
That one, yep.
Okay.
So the very top line, which you said is usually the mistake that we see, right?
Yes.
Same ballots mailed to people at the same address, and in the instance that you used, I accidentally picked up my wife's envelope and returned that. So when that gets put into Veris, say my wife then wanted to go, she just decided she wanted to vote in person. So when she shows up, who was the person that was logged in Veris as having returned a mail ballot? Was it me as the person who filled it out, or the envelope, which was hers? You know what I mean?
You mean if one of you sent back the wrong envelope?
Yeah, so if I
The
sent back,
person that filled out the envelope.
so the voter credit goes to me, so if she shows up, even though her envelope was returned, she's not gonna be flagged as having already voted or having received an absentee.
No, because we're gonna give you credit for having voted, because at that point you, and this is, you know, one thing we talked about internally was that your signature has affirmed at that point. You're affirming through your signature and your PII you provided that you're the person who's sending that back. So we're going to count that for you. And I think that's where the deletion comes in too, that we have to, you know, in Veris delete that so that doesn't block someone else from voting potentially. So we have a little legwork on our end to make sure that everybody's squared up. But that's also why the communication is important too, so that we notify, you know, both of you involved in this. Hey, this, you know, just in case. And so if you do go to the polling place and there is an issue, okay, we've contacted you, get in touch with us, let us know in case there's a problem. I don't anticipate that would happen, but the timing of some of these things can, you know, if it happens to be, you know, same day or something like that, can be a challenge. So.
There's a statement of order that you sign when you complete that envelope. There's a statement of order. Basically, that's why this particular voter will get the voter credit, because they're providing their information and they basically say, this is my ballot.
Yeah.
This is me who is voting. So that's why whatever is printed on the bottom gets disregarded, because you signing, you swearing and affirming this is your ballot.
Okay. That's good.
And in the worst case scenario there, that person would still have the option to vote provisionally if that Veris change hadn't been made yet. So in that scenario, ironically, your wife would vote provisional ballot that you would then adjudicate. So.
Marcus was asking earlier about the envelope, so if you can just pass it.
Yeah, so that window that they were showing it's part of the actual envelope, it's not an insert of this information. So they fill out on the envelope, seal it, and then that tab gets pulled back and then they can see what's written underneath. So, thank you.
Now, when those envelopes are delivered to the election officer teams for pre-processing, you know, the flap is up, right? So the election officers can see the last four numbers of the Social Security number.
We just don't verify it out loud because we do have observers
Right.
in the room at that
Yeah.
point, yes.
That's where the complication comes in with.
And they're not officially checked in, their ballot isn't checked in until pre-processing starts. So it goes back to your office and they get notified from ballot tracker that it's been received in your office.
And waiting to be
Right, but it hasn't been,
processed.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then once the election officers process that, it'll let them know your vote has been counted. for this election. So, yeah. Okay.
Thank you again for the effort that went into building that. It's very good.
All right, so budget initiatives for 2027, we talked about this, and we kind of, the board, you discussed last time, and staff feedback, and we kind of have an order of importance, and it was clear from the board's discussion that the new poll books were at the top of that list. Baseline support for a number of activities is second. As you know too, that is really just a variety of different things that either have had escalating costs or new costs. So just some examples, we've really expanded our number of temps since I started here, and it's really necessary for the operation because, you know, a good example of what we're talking about here, we have all these mail ballots come in, there's a process that you know, to pull off the flap, to check if somebody needs to be updated in ballot tracks, to verify that information. It takes a certain amount of time, and when you got to do these things, you know, 15, 20, 30,000 times during an election, you need temp staff to be able to accomplish those things, you know. Similarly, like the call volume goes up. We have training, but we can't have one trainer do every single class. We have a team of temporary trainers that support our training manager. So we've expanded those, and I think what that's resulted in is, you know, better training, better communication to voters, better service overall. But there are some, you know, costs that relate to that. Some of them are specific problems too. We don't really have a good training location right now. Space in general has been an issue for us, and we've kind of we've worked with the Historical Society to secure this room for long periods of time for pre-processing and cap during each election. But we use it specifically for that reason and then for Canvas, because we don't want to have ballots in here one day and a training class in the next day. So we are securing some training space right now, and that's going to cost some money because we've been using Buck Hall, and they've been very generous with letting us use that space for free. But they also have priority over it, so we can get kicked out, you know, on short notice and not be able to plan out. So we're working with them, and there's a church, Woodbine. It's right in the middle of the county, right off 234 there, near Independent Hill. That we're looking at spaces there and basically going to try to pay, you know, a rental fee for each election, and then have a space where we know we have training space secure in a large room for, you know, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever it is each election. So the postage costs related to the voter guide, you know, it's about $25,000, and that's a cheap rate. We get a nonprofit rate because the business that prints those for us, they're a veteran-owned nonprofit, and they get a lower rate. So we ride off that, and that saves us a lot of money. But we still need some money to support that. So it's a number of things. I'd say our rough operating budget year to year outside of our initiatives is probably about $3.8 or $3.9 million. And so this is, I don't know, another 5, 6, 7%, depending on where we land, in sort of ongoing costs that I think we need to account for. You know, there just certain areas too, inflationary costs have affected some things more than others. You know, our ballot printing costs have increased more, paper has gotten more expensive, even faster than the, rising costs we've seen in other areas in recent years. So I think a lot of that support is really needed. And then we talked about an outreach position that I think that explaining to people how the voting process works, helping voters get registered is one of the core functions outlined in the code for my position. And so these are dollar amounts around this. So I think it's going to be, it's a pretty big ask this year. I think the poll books obviously are the big line item here. Now that is a one-time cost, thankfully, so it's not an ongoing cost. We got a small set of poll books for pre-processing, so we're going to use the Knowing poll pads. We just had training with them on, is that this week?
Monday.
Yeah, okay. I thought it was not last week, but it was this week. 2 days ago, we had training with them, so we're ready to use those for pre-processing in this election. That'll give us a chance to test those out a little bit. But then we need to order a lot of them for the election if we're going to use them at some point in fiscal 27. So that is, yeah.
So I have a couple questions. How much do you know offhand, or can you get this for me, how much does early voting cost the taxpayers?
I have slides on that. Early voting in a presidential year, I'm going to say 115 to 120.
What is that, 115?
115,000 to
Okay.
120,000.
Okay.
In a primary, and this is part of the, one of the reasons that we looked at the early voting changes we did was to sort of maximize the resources we had during times when voters were voting the most. So having more sites open for a longer period of time at early voting can be paid for if we have a little less during like a primary, where we don't see a lot of early voters. So, so a primary might cost, I'm going to say 45 to 50,000 across all of our sites. A presidential election probably is like 120,000, and every kind of shade in between there. It depends on. It takes a minimum number of people to staff each location, and you have to have more. At the DMV, I think in the presidential we had like 11 people or 12 people. 12 people. Because keeping up with curbside alone took like 3 people, and we added a separate scanner there for just curbside, so it wasn't disrupting the voting for the other voters that were there. But we had 2 or 3 people that just constantly going out to cars and getting them through over there. So whereas if it's a primary, we just need 4 or 5 people in the room to cover the basic. You need I'd say you need at least 4 officers at any polling place to have like a chief, an assistant chief, somebody checking people in, somebody monitoring the scanner to the voting area. That's kind of your minimum needs. So it really varies based on how busy the election is, how long the early voting sites are open, and all those different
And
factors.
then how much are election officers paid for their work?
They get paid, what's the baseline,
It's between 16 and 20 an hour for early voting.
Oh, for early voting you mean, or?
Well, I don't know what the categories are.
Well, early voting they're paid hourly, and on election day they're paid,
Stipend.
it's a daily stipend.
Yeah, one election officer per precinct is 20,000.
Yeah.
Basically, it's a good way to look at it. Early voting, each precinct average is about $1,000 a day
Yeah. Yeah.
per precinct. Yeah.
So.
That's all of the officers at that precinct, not per officer.
So it's just early voting staffing and election day staffing are a pretty significant portion of our budget. That's at least, I don't know, I'd say it's definitely past $500,000. I have specific numbers. I wasn't really prepared to.
Yeah, I just was,
No.
thought, yeah. Since we're talking.
But I'm just saying I can get you something more specific, Heidi, in our budget. Like I can show you I can send you all last year's budget and show you, hey, here's how much our early voting officers cost, and here's how much our election day officers cost last year.
That'd be great, thank you.
Yeah. So, in fact, I can just give you guys sort of a rough overall budget. They're all categorized, so you can see that we're spending $400,000 or $500,000 or more on election officers in any given year. We have different line items for things like professional development is real small, maybe $8,000 or $10,000 for that. Food for maybe $5,000 for food for those events that we have like Canvas where people are kind of in the room and can't really leave, and so there's a lot of different probably about 40 different spending categories that we have overall. The staffing, the full-time staff, salaries and benefits, and the temp staff is probably the majority of our budget. That's 60 or 70% of our budget, and then officers and vendor costs and printing costs and all that make up the rest of it. So that baseline support is just, there are some realities of some rising costs. There are some costs to doing elections well, I would say. It doesn't cost that much more to do election. You can fund $3.8 million and have elections that get by, or you can spend $4 million and have elections that are great. So we're a pretty small fry when it comes to the budgets of the county agencies. So to that end, then on the next few slides, these are going to be our arguments for these budgetary actions, which is that investment in our agency is a good value, that you really get a big impact. We interact with so many of the county residents at any given year. We're second as an agency. We're just behind, I think, libraries and just ahead of parks, or vice versa. That's the 1, 2, 3. Library, parks and recreation, and elections are your top 3 interactions. All three of those departments are interacting with typically about half the residents in any given year. And we cost a lot less than either of those 2 departments do. And that's not, I'm not throwing shade at them. They have to have, library takes brick and mortar and books and shelves and staff, so it just costs more. We're more of a pop-up operation, a couple times a year. We get positive ratings from Prince William County voters, so we have gotten investments from the supervisors in recent years for things to improve our infrastructure, to improve our services to voters, and that has shown in the residential surveys. And then I think we've demonstrated good use of funds and received awards from these. We've gotten a number of awards, obviously. We've also, I'd say, saved easily more than $500,000 in the 4 years that I've been here, either through, and when I first started, I pulled back some requests that had been made from the previous director that I thought were unnecessary, that we weren't using our current resources well. And also we're very efficient. We don't use a lot of overtime. Overtime is usually 10% or less of our budget, which is really good for an election agencies. There's certainly agencies out there that are running in their overtime in an election year in the 30 to 40% range of their overall salaries. So I think we use them well. And yeah, to that end, I guess I got ahead of myself here. We're good stewards of public funds. I mentioned under budget. I mentioned efficient staffing. A lot of these expanded funds too. There's just been compliance, and this is part of what I talked to the state legislature about over the last couple of months, was that there's been a number of mandates for ADA requirements, for security requirements, for a whole bunch of things that they cost money to do these things, and to have those services and compliance available. Even the addition of mail voting and early voting, 5 years ago or 6 years ago, the funding for, in my experience, in all the places I've been, you add the requirements and you add the services that the legislators want to see for the voters, and then they don't always have funding with them. So it takes time for those monies to come in and to actually provide the funds for staffing those early voting centers, as you were asking about, Heidi, or getting temps to go out and do ADA surveys if it's too much for our staff, that kind of thing. So, and my other thing for this would be, we'll have a big ask this year. I don't know that we need anything in a planned initiative in FY20. I feel like we've spent the last several years building up infrastructure for getting new equipment that is a higher security level. We added the high-speed scanner, which not only makes our process more efficient, but when I started, the supervisors were on us about, hey, why does it take so long to get the mail voting and early voting results on election night? Why is that hours and hours after the precinct results are coming out? Well, that's now the first thing that we put out. By 8 o'clock, our early voting and our mail voting numbers are out. Obviously, that's a big portion of the numbers. So by 8:30, 8:20, we're pretty much done. There might be a few precincts that are stragglers, but Prince William County's results in a timely fashion. And some of that is just literal IT infrastructure to make it possible, so that we have a central computer that's tabulating all that stuff, which also reduces errors, rather than having a staff that's entering 13 different tapes into a spreadsheet, which can both make more errors, which we've seen in the past, and also just takes longer to do. So, so that would be my,
So the operative word on point number 4 is the word planned.
yeah. Well, we don't know what if the state passes a law and says we have to do this, then, we might have to add a position, or we might have to say, you know what, to be compliant with this, we're gonna need, 2 temps for 6 weeks before an election. But usually, if it's a small thing like that, we can usually work within our budget to adjust some of those things, so, yeah. Yeah, we don't know what could come down the road. Maybe the violence and concerns become such to the point that we say, you know what, we need police officers at our, early voting sites or polling places at some point every day. I don't even know if that would be possible, to be honest with you. There's certainly issues with that as well, but, yeah, no plans. In other words, I think we're in a pretty good position for providing the services that we are required to provide, and also the, having a process that really works well for Prince William County voters, with the budget that we've built up now and a couple other things that we're, namely the poll books, in particular. So, and as I noted before, these things, they go through a process. They have to go through the gauntlet with the OMB and the county managers group, and then there's so one of these may not make it through that process, and then there's what goes to the supervisors for a request, and then they might say, nope, we're not funding this. They might say, yep, we think this is a great thing. In fact, we think you should have 2 outreach positions, and we're gonna fund that much. So we don't always control what happens in that process. We make plans and recommendations, and then we, manage with either the gifts we're given or the crumbs that we're left with. We make do with what we can. So, lastly, I think we've really shown that we are, setting a good standard around the state as a county, that this would be, not only have the VVSG 2.0 compliant scanners, but these are the only poll book currently that's certified by the EAC. Now, we should note that poll books are not required to be certified by the EAC, but I think that shows that this company is really meeting high standards if they have actually achieved that for the first time. This equipment also speeds up the check-in process. So if you're talking about the poll books, you save 5 or 8 seconds on each voter, and that really makes a difference when you're talking about a day where you have 2,000 people coming in at the DMV, for example. So it helps reduce your lines. On the other end of the spectrum, allowing voters to verify their selections might take a little longer, but it gives voters another level of, confidence. Thank you, Marcus. I'm a little tired with my wordsmithing at this point. So maybe the poll books help speed that up to account for the fact that the back end will be slowing down a little bit, but we're giving people a process they should have confidence in. And again, establishing, some best practices around Virginia. I would point to, some of the things that we have done, I've been able to realign our resources without actually asking for more positions. So, I don't know, John and Natalia's positions were new. Dahlia's position is new. I'm pretty sure one of those at least was just, I think 2 of those were realigning positions that we had, and then one of them was asking for additional funds for a position at one point. But, as an example, since we added Dahlia to the team, some of the things that we've gotten awards for have been, her work and the work of our office directly, because we have somebody who can organize a voting sticker contest, or because we have someone who has, Dahlia scans all the results tapes that go up online. So having people that can do some of these different things helps us, increase transparency or increase services to voters. There's nothing wrong with, people love the I voted stickers. There's nothing wrong with something also just being a little bit of fun, because I think that also, it's something that brings a little more joy to the process. is something that's really great. And I occasionally see our I voted stickers on people's cars around the county right now, which is always kind of fun. And then, that also gives people we get a little more media coverage for it that reminds people about voting. There's a cycle to all this that helps to promote voting and inform people of that process as well.
So if the supervisors approve the new poll books, then the goal would be to have the new scanners and new poll books in place for the election in November a year from now.
I think we'd have to talk about that and decide what kind of makes the most sense. On the one hand, we didn't redo the manual before the November election, this election, like we usually do, because we felt like there weren't a lot of law changes that necessitated that. We didn't have any equipment changes that did, so we did an addendum for it. I think our plan is, as we're implementing this new equipment for the primary next year, to redo our manual. We will have to, because all the steps and pictures and things will need to be redone. So we're having to do that, definitely, assuming our new equipment comes this winter, that the certification from the state gets finalized and we get that in the time that we're planning it for. We then have to look at, do we then want to redo the manual again over the summer for the November general, or would it be better to say, okay, let's implement the new scanners in calendar 27, and then let's implement the new poll books in calendar 28? Or would we just say, you know what, outside of getting the manual done, which shouldn't take too long, we can probably get that done, and if these poll books are easier to use, then shouldn't really be in it. We'll have to have the officers do a little more training, next year. But I think if the poll books are easier to use and easier to set up in the morning, I think they may not know it, but that's probably a good trade-off for them. Probably makes their lives a little bit easier for a little more training for what should be a smoother process for them on election day in particular. So I think that's something we'd have to look at and see, when the funds are getting approved, what's the timeline for implementation. I think we have a plan for our scanners. It would be probably ideal if we had maybe done these in conjunction with each other and sort of done them at the same time, but we might not have gotten the funds approved. So there's a lot of factors here that are a little uncertain. So I think we'd have to look at that. Do you guys have any feedback on what you think would make the most sense for that from an implementation standpoint? Or maybe something, maybe not to think about today, but to discuss maybe after the election, or if we get the funds for it.
So, remind me of the timing for the budget. When do we submit a request?
Now.
Okay, so are we submitting a request for all three of those?
We're in the process of that, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so I support 2 of the 3.
Okay.
So I don't know I don't know what kind of action you're asking the board to take with regard to that, but just so you know, that's my position.
Yeah. I understand that, Heidi. You mentioned that the last time.
Yeah.
The outreach position, it is in the code that's a responsibility that I have. There's obviously delineation of certain responsibilities that the board has and that I have, and things like voter registration fall more in my bailiwick, and things like obviously you guys are exclusively the certifiers of elections. You guys have a strong amount of control over the election officer appointment process, and so I think this is one that falls more in my wheelhouse. And while I certainly have put it towards the bottom of the list, given what the board's priorities are and feedback from staff as well on what we think is most important, that I do think that is a responsibility for me. And I do think that in a county that is our size, that you have to have more resources for these kind of things than, say, if you're in a county that's got 30,000 people or 60,000 people. So I think it's appropriate, and I understand your concern and about taxpayer funding, and at the end of the day, that's the supervisors will decide that too. And if they think that as a body that's their prerogative, then that's where we are subject to what their discretion is and what they think is important. Because we may give them that list and they may go, you guys don't need new poll books. We just bought new equipment. We're not giving you money for that, but the outreach position is very important to us. We're gonna fund that and those other things. I don't know. I can only tell them what we think our priorities are based on your guys' feedback and staff's feedback and our varied responsibilities. And then they're ultimately gonna make the decision that they do. And like I said, we have to, manage the consequences of that, whether that is, okay, good, we're implementing new poll books, or, okay, we didn't get much support for that, and what things are we gonna have to cut to make our budget work next year, because with these increasing costs, we're gonna have to cut something somewhere. So, we're planning at some point on doing new election officer shirts for the officers. Maybe that fits well in our budget next year. Maybe we've gotta push that, kick that can down the road until we have more support for it. So there's a lot of those little things that add up to a lot, obviously, that we have to look at in the given election. Some things that we specifically get money for from the county, like upgrading our security that we've done over the last couple of years, to things that are really more day-to-day decisions where John or Natalia come to me and say, hey, I need a new envelope opener that will improve our process by this percentage, and it will reduce our temp needs by this, but it does cost this up front. How do you want to do with that? And those are kind of the decisions I have to kind of make day to day when we're just talking about, a few $1,000s or sometimes even just hundreds of dollars, and making sure that our budget is kind of aligned. One thing we have done is we've worked with the county, and we just redid our budget categorization for about 20 different categories, because the funds and where we've spent them for several years and where they're lined up are not making sense. Our bottom line has worked, over the course of 4 years, but I think this will help us track better. It'll also help me if you guys have requests for reports. It'll make it easier for me to send your report and not go, now keep in mind, code, we're gonna be 100,000 over in this code, and we're gonna have no funding in this category, but it balances out, so we've been making some progress on that, which has been good. So
You had mentioned that it might be helpful if there was a letter from the board kind of explaining these priorities, why we think they're important. When would that letter need to be submitted?
I think more specifically the poll books, since you guys have labeled that the top priority, and since that is a significant item. I think also with that one in particular, we did get a hardware refresh for our current ones, like, that was right when I started, in 2021?
Yeah, it's about
Into
4 years.
2021, going to 2022?
Yeah.
So about 4 years ago from when this would take place. So that, when you're going into these things, it's like, you're thinking about, okay, well, what reasons would supervisors say we shouldn't fund this or we should fund this? And I think that one of the things would be, we did that hardware refresh not too long ago. And I've said to you guys that I kind of regret not making a decision about changing poll books sooner, but I was in my first couple months here, and I don't think that, like, coming in and being like, we're gonna change all of our equipment, and we're doing, there was a lot of stuff that was already changing, so it just didn't seem like the best decision at the time. Hindsight's 2020. I mean, our equipment has worked. It's not that it's not doing its job effectively. It's just that it's making it harder for officers than it needs to be, and it takes a little longer in the process, and it's making us very nervous from that 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. window on election day, when we can be focusing on what really are the true emergencies rather than overloaded with one particular problem during that time. So
Any helpful communication, though, and correspondence from the board that would need to accompany the budget? When would we need to have that ready?
that's probably more early next calendar year. Right now, the budget is, I have to submit what I'm proposing for initiatives for us to OMB. OMB and the county manager's office are then reviewing those over the next several months. And then, like I said, some stuff could get chopped before it makes it to the supervisors. And then once it makes it to the supervisors, they're gonna be looking at that. They do budget approvals in April. So February, March, April is really when they are discussing these in meetings, reviewing them, and some years I have to go in and really justify things to them, and then I know this past year with the big equipment change. You know, I ran into one of the supervisors in the hallway there where they were on a break, and they said to me, they said, "What are you doing here? No, none of us have any issue with your with your initiative this year." So it's just, you never know in a given year. It depends on their budget realities. You know, the county's been in a pretty good budget position for right now, and probably for the foreseeable year, because they're maximally taxing the data centers, and they're getting, you know, it's a rare instance that the county is increasing revenue and increasing agency funds while simultaneously cutting taxes and tax rates, and they've been able to do that for the past couple of years. I'm sure that will come to an end at some point, but at least right now, the data centers, for whatever you think of them, are growing funding and are putting the county in a position where they do have more funds available while still being able to reduce the burden on taxpayers. So
When is our last opportunity to shape those priorities in the budget request?
up until the time when the supervisors make their final decision. So, but I think, you know, you all could start that process as soon as possible. It might be better to wait till we get through the election and the holidays, and then when they're really more focused on it is in the first quarter of the year, and maybe send some letters out or have some communications with them about why this particular item is important to the board, what the benefits are, and, you know, having those conversations with them about why it's important to you all, which I think is, you know, sometimes the priorities are different depending on both your personal views and also your political views. Sometimes they line up with partisan concerns, sometimes they don't. I think in this instance, there are benefits that align across partisan lines and across personal viewpoints, and clearly it's something that you all have, you know, full alignment on. I think letting the supervisors know that and communicating the benefits to them. Obviously, we do that when they call me in. The county manager does that as well through that process. But I think if they hear from you, that adds an extra emphasis to why this is important to you. And I don't think, I'm not aware that you all have done that, you know, as a unit since I have been here. So I think that would probably have more of an impact too. Like, hey, we don't get this is really important to us from the electoral board too often. So I think since you've been reserved and using that political capital, that might make it more impactful in this instance as well. So.
Thank you.
Not a budget issue, but so are there, with all the population growth in various parts of the county, are there any of our precincts where we're getting close to, you know, the population levels where we have to, you know, create a new precinct or split a precinct or?
There's a couple. We were very smart when we were working with the county on this in redistricting back in 2022. And we were looking at, okay, what areas what precincts currently are obviously close to those numbers. And that process split up a lot of precincts that were in the 4,000 or 5,000 range or more into, you know, we took maybe 2 precincts that were both at 4,500 voters, and we split them up into 3. So now they both have room to grow. But we also, in that process, were looking at things like, okay, the courts district is planned for this area. We don't know the timeline of when that's going to happen, but that could potentially add, I don't know what the total number is, but I know it's going to be, you know, 1,000, 1,500, a lot of people are going to be potentially in dense housing there. Do we have room for that? Are we starting off with that precinct being particularly small, so that if there's an influx of 1,000 people in 2 years or 3 years, we have room for that. So we've done that in a lot of instances. I think we only have 2 precincts right now up in Gainesville area that are potentially, legally they don't have to be, they probably won't need to be split up until the next redistricting, but we monitored that after the presidential, because we have to, there's some segment of code that if we have a certain number of voters that vote in a presidential election, that we then have to modify those precincts, and they did not meet that threshold. But they are getting larger, and I think it's the two precincts right now. I can't remember do you know the numbers of them?
One of them is 409 in Gainesville, and the other one's actually in Woodbridge, 608.
Oh, okay. So there's a couple locations where they're getting larger, and it's like, well, over time we might want to take these two precincts and make them into three for ease. Sometimes the facilities may not be there, so I don't think we're going to have any legal requirement to do anything anytime soon. If we would, it would probably be right before redistricting, but I think most likely we are good through the next redistricting process, and if we're not required to, then the fact that so many people are voting by mail and voting early really also has reduced the concern about, like, even if you have 4,500 voters and a high turnout, almost half of them are voting before election day even arrives, so you don't have this like concern about, boy, we're going to need 4 or 5 poll books there to get people through fast, because you're still only seeing a couple thousand voters at your busiest precincts during your busiest election, so it reduces the pressure a lot.
All right.
We are monitoring that, Keith.
All right, anything else on budget? If not, we will go to new business, appointment of new election officers.
So you all have a list. John, did we get any? Okay, we did not get feedback from the parties, so this is, per your guys' policy, if we don't have objections, then we go ahead and appoint them based on the party preference they submitted to us, and obviously the parties can later review and request changes. It would not change for this election, but for future elections. So we have 4 new officers. Nice to see given our Republican needs, that they continue to exceed the number of Democrats. That's unusual and has been there for the past couple of months here, so that's good. Not a ton of new applicants, but I think it's always a little bit of a down year after the presidential, because so many people want to work the presidential, and then it kind of falls off and you kind of rebuild. So 40 officers, 50 Dems, 20 Republicans, 5 nonpartisans. We had 1 request from an officer who requested to be Republican, and that was approved by the party. So this is the list of new officers for appointment, and that 1 changed officer.
So are these people still, they could be available for this election?
Yes, I'm sure that Dina and Rick are already like have, I'm sure some of these are already like earmarked to go to a particular precinct to even up numbers or to fill a gap of somebody who left. So, yeah, they'll probably leave the meeting once they've been approved and contact some of these officers right away to get them in the mix. So, am I correct in that assumption? 100%. Okay.
Well, we don't want to delay that, so I move that we approve the list as presented.
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, unanimous, and Dina, go after
Get out
them.
of here. You guys got work to do. Okay.
Okay, last item is public comment. Do we have anybody that signed up, or anyone that wants to make any public comment today? Okay, we have one person, Denny Doherty.
Chairman, Denny Doherty, on behalf of the Republican Party of Prince William County. First of all, I want to address the issue of parity and election officers. The General Registrar did send out his proposed assignments, and in a number of cases, more than 20, there was a situation where there were more of one party than the other when there were an even number of officers. That does not comply with the code, and I'm certain that adjustments are being made to bring that into compliance. I just would request that when those adjustments are made, that the chairs get a new update as to what the situation is. The other subject I want to address quickly has to do with early voting and the process of observation by authorized representatives. I had the pleasure of being at the first day of early voting here at the main office, and it was being very professionally run, being very attentive to many things, but there were limitations on the access that to some of the activities that needed to be observed. The general registrar was not feeling well that day. He cordially invited us to correspond with him if we've had issues. I did following that, and I've not heard back from him. And I just want to say it would be very helpful if we could get responses before early voting expands to all of the locations on the 19th. Thank you very much.
All right.
Could I,
Thank you.
Make some comments
Sure.
after that? So, if you have a moment, Mr. Downey, I would encourage you to go back and watch when this video recording is available for this meeting. We talked about both of those issues at the beginning. And the 23 precincts that you referenced, where the parity is not quite where we want it to be. The reasons for that were explained primarily due to the fact that they expect certain election officers, a certain number of election officers will probably fall out of the mix. And so they intentionally overschedule, expecting those numbers to get closer together as we get closer to election day. And the general registrar and his staff have already said that they will be publishing additional updates to that assignment list. So we should start to see that gap narrow, which is good. Regarding the authorized representatives being able to observe, we specifically addressed curbside voting at the beginning of the meeting. And I think we kind of all came to a general consensus that where curbside observation is concerned, authorized representatives, if they're within 10 to 15 feet of the car, that should be acceptable. And then we'd also discussed creating a more standardized list of do's and don'ts for both election officers and authorized representatives to remove some of the subjectivity from precinct to precinct. And so we will be working on that. But those are some of the things we discussed in greater detail than I just laid out here. So when the recording's available, I would encourage you to go back and watch that.
And also, there is a online training for authorized representatives that is scheduled or going to be scheduled for next Thursday, October 16th at 7 p.m. So any authorized representatives can take advantage of the training of what, again, do's and don'ts, what's allowed, what's not, and how to conduct themselves.
Okay, anything else?
No closed session or anything today, so.
Okay. All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor, say aye. Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
You see, it's going to be short.
We'll see you after election.
I was like,